Hey team, in this training, we are going to be going over targeting, ad audience targeting, exactly what it is. And specifically, we are going to have some action steps that are going to walk you through getting your ad targeting set up and ready. So that way you are rocking and rolling when it comes to actually launching. So that's what we're going to be doing in all of the training sections for this specific training. But in this specific training section, we're actually going to be going over the explanation of what targeting actually is, why it's important, and all of the mental models that you need to know so that way you can think through targeting properly. So that way, again, we've said this many times before, we want you to be able to cultivate that winner's mindset in which you are resourceful and you have all of the principles that are necessary in order for you to be successful doing these actions, doing these skills, doing these money-making behaviors in the long term. And it's only going to happen once you actually have the principles and the understandings behind everything. So it's not just, hey, click this, do this, do this, do this, do this, because the tactics without the strategy are not going to actually allow you to understand how to do this long term, especially when things change. So that way you're going to be hooked to somebody like a guru or somebody else for the rest of your life, which you don't want. You want to be able to have the freedom to be able to learn these skills for yourself. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into the explanation. So like we said, inside of this training, we are continuing stage 1, which is the pre-launch setup. If you remember the 3 stages of actually getting launched. And then in stage number 1, we said that we are going to be preparing all of the assets and all of the homework that is going to be required in order for you to actually get ready for that launch, right? And so thankfully at this point, you probably already have a bunch of your ad assets ready. You have your funnel assets ready. You've already gone ahead and set up your Facebook ad assets, right? Gone ahead and set up your tracking as well. And so in this training, we're going over research and preparing targeting and audiences. And then in an upcoming training, we are going to be going over data and KPIs. Now, just a quick refresher on why stage 1 and all of this pre-launch is so important is because every battle is won before it is fought. And this is the mindset that is so absolutely critical in order to cultivate, because as you're seeing, 90% of the work that we are doing is actually happening off of the platforms, right? So if you think about when you're creating your ad creative and your ad copy and you're preparing your funnel assets and you're doing all this setup, it's not happening within the actual ad platforms, right? And so this is what we're referring to when we talk about actually getting everything set up. And so yes, it is a lot more work in the front end, but you're going to see once it comes time to be able to actually launch, it's literally like we have all of the assets put together and it's just copy and paste, build everything, and then hit that launch button. And so that's really what we're talking about when we say why all of this is so important in terms of the pre-launch. Beautiful. Now, with that introduction out of the way, let's go ahead and answer the main $1 million question, which is, hey, what is targeting, right? This is the first question that when somebody hears that, hey, we're going to be talking about targeting, well, what the heck is targeting? So targeting, also known as ad audience targeting, is the topic that deals with deciding which audiences to actually put an ad in front of, right? So for example, are you going to put your ad in front of all women between the ages of 18 and 25? Are you going to put your ad in front of women between the ages of 40 and 60 who have a top 1% income? Are you going to put your ad in front of men who live in Scotland who are interested in martial arts? Maybe, I don't know. Are you going to put your ad in front of everyone who lives in the Miami, FTL, Fort Lauderdale area who are baby boomers in that age range who have a top 10%, 5%, 1% income? Who knows? Is it going to be all genders who are between the ages of 18 and 65 who live in the US? That's massive, right? That's a massive population set right there, right? Men who are interested in LeBron James and are also marketing directors who live in Manhattan, right? And so what you're seeing here is that all of these audiences, all of these targeting are all different segments. All of these are different psychographics. All of these are different demographics. And literally there are not only these, but unlimited possibilities, as you're going to see in just a little bit when we go over the walkthrough. And so it's very important to understand, okay, I have to do some pre-work to go ahead and do some research ahead of time to know, hey, who are the actual audiences that I am going to put these ads in front of? And so just as important as the actual ad that we've talked about in terms of the copy and in terms of the creative is also the targeting of that ad, right? Because you might have amazing copy and amazing creative, but if you're putting it in front of the wrong targeting, then it's not going to matter, right? And so this is why it's so important. And then obviously the same way, you might be in front of the right target market, but if you are wrong creative and wrong copy, then that's a totally different issue, right? We've talked about the importance of copy and creative in separate trainings. But in this training, we're specifically talking about the importance of targeting and making sure that we are getting that ad in front of the right audience going forward, right? And so when we talk about targeting is really all about who exactly is going to be seeing your ad, right? That is what the topic of targeting deals with, right? And so it is a science. There is an experimental phase with it. There is a testing phase with it. And so it's very important to understand all of this. Now, when you see all of these specifics, right? We're talking about like very, very, very specific audiences here, right? We talk about, hey, people who are living in this specific zip code, this specific city, this specific state, between this number of age ranges with this income level, right? And maybe people who are single, right? People who are married, right? You're going to see there's so many different people who speak Spanish versus people who speak English, like so many different options for targeting, right? When somebody first hears this, the very first question, right, especially if they've never been in this internet marketing industry before, is like, whoa, wait a second. Like, can we really get that specific with advertising? And the answer to that question is, yup. And as you're going to see in just a second, when we actually get to the walkthrough, we can actually get even more specific than you could ever imagine. Like, it's literally insane. And the truth is that this is one of the big, massive superpowers when it comes to the internet marketing world compared to other types of marketing, specifically things like traditional marketing, right? Back in the day, if you think about like billboard ads and like ads that are on top of taxi cabs and that kind of stuff. And so this is the reason why really in the last 5 to 10 years, you could say, right? That's really when the industry has really started to blossom and really started to mature. This is the reason why internet marketing has become such a massive thing. This is the reason why the industry is so amazing and so massive and is such an amazing opportunity for those who can learn the skill set, which is what you are doing as you go through these trainings. And not only that, these skills, and I think I've mentioned this in other trainings before, is that these skills can be applied to many other different types of businesses, right? So when we first learned internet marketing, right, years ago, it wasn't doing the 100K Mastermind. It wasn't doing this specific product. It wasn't doing this specific company. It wasn't doing this specific organization, right? But what it is, like, I remember when I first learned, let me give you an example. When I first learned internet marketing, it was because of the fact that I was trying to do internet marketing for my dad, who was running a car dealership in Orlando, Florida, right? And so I was growing up and I was young and I was interested in this stuff. And so, hey, I started learning internet marketing for a local business, right? And then after that, I was like, hey, what if I did internet marketing for mattress stores? And then after that, it's like, hey, what if I did internet marketing to sell t-shirts online? Hey, what if I did internet marketing for my e-commerce business? Hey, what if I did internet marketing for my consulting business? So it grew, but it was all based on that fundamental skill set, that foundational skill set that was internet marketing and the skills of internet marketing. And so down the road, right, internet marketing over here, down the road, as you learn these skills, maybe in 3-5 years from now, it's not going to be for your coaching business. Maybe it's not going to be for your own education business. There's entire companies that are agencies that all they do is do copy or creative, or it's called media buying. And media buying is where basically you're going out there and you are targeting and running ads, internet marketing for other companies, right? How many local businesses are out there that have no idea how to be able to run internet marketing? Now, obviously, that's a whole separate business model. I don't want you to get shiny objects and be like, oh, that's an amazing idea. Like, I should do that. Well, remember, the grass is greener on the other side. When you're starting out something, there's uninformed optimism. You're like, oh, you know what? That's amazing. And then you get into it and you realize that there are cons to it, just like there are for every single business model that is out there. Okay, but I'm just opening your eyes to understand the power of internet marketing, right? And if you really think about it, Facebook is tracking every single data point for billions of sites and users around the internet, right? Instagram knows what you like and what you are searching for on their platform, how long you spend looking at XYZ picture, right? Google has access to pretty much all of the internet's emails, right, and search history. YouTube knows what videos we are watching and for how long and what we're actually interested in. And so you could argue that these social media platforms, these ad platforms, know us better than we know ourselves. And there's this famous story that's out there that I've heard. I don't know if it's real, but I can imagine that it is I remember that somebody was telling me that there was a woman who got coupons for pregnant women, okay? And she was like a young girl. She was like 18, 19 years old or something. And her dad got so pissed off, and I think this was the company, I think it was Target. And what happened was that Target had, based off their algorithm and based off the shopping behavior, had identified that this specific woman, right, because she had like a Target membership or something, like Target, rewards card or something, that she was probably pregnant, right? And so the dad was like pissed off, and he was like, how can you say this? She's just a young girl, like all this stuff, right? You're sending my little girl these coupons for like pregnancy products, right? And they had actually identified within their algorithm that women who are either pregnant or about to get pregnant, right, in that phase, they purchase these types of foods, they purchase these types of products, and they're like really inconspicuous products. Like, we're not talking about like she's purchasing diapers, like she's purchasing like oatmeal and like just random stuff subconsciously that she doesn't even know. And she actually didn't even know that she was pregnant. And then she found out that she was in fact pregnant like 3 months later. And all because of the algorithm had already been trained on hundreds and thousands and millions of people who had similar psychographics and demographics and had pinpointed something that she and her family already did not know. Right? How crazy is that, right? Even if you think about, for example, Google, every single time you make a purchase, even if it's on a separate site, right? Think about Amazon, right? Amazon has so much data around purchasing behavior, but even Google, right? Every time you buy something on Amazon, well, guess what? Where do you get that confirmation? You get that confirmation in your email. And if you have a Gmail account, which the vast majority of the people on the internet do, well, guess what? Now, all of a sudden, Google has learned what you actually purchased on all of these other sites. And so if you think about how much data these advertising companies have, Meta and Google, they can specifically pinpoint audiences to an unbelievable level of precision, right? And so we're going to show you what some of those options are in just a second. But I also want you to know, in addition to the options that we have available to ourselves, which is an insane amount, the algorithms and the AI actually have even more data behind the scenes because of the fact that they are being trained on this data and collecting that data. So it's literally like an all-seeing eye. It's literally like this all-seeing algorithm that has data on billions and billions and billions and billions of people, right? And so I really am kind of wanting you to understand the behind the scenes of this, because as a consumer, yeah, it's scary. It's like, what the heck is going on? Like, these people know me, right? But sometimes also as a consumer, it's very convenient, right? Like, we love it as well. At the same time, I know there's a whole bunch of people who talk about privacy laws and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, human beings are always going to value things that are convenient and easy and fast and save us time. And so I'm sure that the vast majority of people would gladly go ahead and exchange privacy in exchange for easiness and convenience, right? It's just very nice to be able to have all of this pinpointed and tailored for us, right? Imagine an entire world that is tailored for you. Now, again, that is pros and cons, right? There can be argued left and right, but really, as an advertiser, as a business owner, as an online entrepreneur, truthfully, what it is it's exciting. It's exciting because of the fact that you have access to so much information that is going to allow you to be able to put your ads in front of exactly the right type of audiences. Okay, so this is the first question I wanted to go ahead and address. The second point that we want to go ahead and talk about right now is specifically around where in the actual ad platforms all of this targeting is going to take place, right? So yes, we've talked a little bit about the theoretical side of it, right? Like, okay, cool, this is very awesome, the ad platforms are very powerful, all of this stuff. But the question is like, hey, if we decided that we wanted to show our ads in front of, XYZ women, XYZ men, XYZ age group, XYZ location, XYZ language, right? All of these things, well, okay, hey, coaches, like, where does that actually happen, right? Like, how do we actually do it, right? This is the theoretical, but what's the tactical side of this? And the answer to that is that all of this happens, at least on the Facebook Meta ad platform, it happens on the ad set level. Okay, so let's recap. Okay, so remember in the past, we talked about the anatomy of a Facebook ad account, right? And all of this stuff over here, these were the assets that we had set up, but the actual like day-to-day operations of running ads happens here on the campaign, ad set, and ad level. Okay, and so we talked about this in the past, but this is just a quick recap. Okay, so we have campaigns, and then within campaigns you have ad sets, and then within ad sets you have ads. And so within one campaign you can have many ad sets, and then within one ad set, you can have many ads. Now, I know inside of this diagram, it shows that there's 2 ad sets per campaign, but that is not actually the case because obviously we couldn't draw unlimited number of ad sets. So that's just an example purpose. But you can have 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 50, 100 different ad sets within a campaign. Now, obviously, you might not want to do that, but that's a whole separate conversation around the strategy of how to structure all of this, right? But then on top of that, you might then have maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 different ads within a specific ad set. And then what's going to happen here is that within every single one of these levels, okay, and you're going to see this in the walkthrough, we're going to go through in just a second, but I want you to understand this conceptually right now, is that within every single level, there are different buttons and different settings that we're able to actually select, okay? So on the actual campaign level, we're able to go ahead and really select, hey, what is the campaign objective? What is the campaign budget? And then on the ad set level, that's where we can set, hey, what's the ad set budget? What's the audience and targeting, the placements and the optimizations? And then on the ads level, we have a lot of other settings that we can actually set up for the ad as well, okay? So when we're talking about targeting, which is the topic of this training, right? We're taking, hey, what is the audience that we want to show our ad to? All of that is happening at the actual ad set level, right? Now, we might have different ad sets for many different purposes. It might not only be for different targeting, right? So when we talked up here and we say, hey, we can have 10, 20, 30 different ad sets within a campaign, it's not always going to be like, hey, because I want to target, let's say women in this one, and I want to target men in this one over here, and then I want to have a third ad set over here that's going to target all genders. That might be one reason we decide to have multiple ad sets. But as you're going to learn later on as you go through some of the upcoming trainings, right, there's multiple reasons why we might have multiple different ad sets, okay? Is this making sense so far? I know, again, this is super theoretical, but I'm breaking it down step by step, right? So we went super abstract, super strategy. Now we've gone a little bit more tactical, and then we're going to specifically go even more and more tactical. We're actually going to get into the trenches here in just a second and show you actually what it looks like on the ad platforms, but you're starting to get a better idea of okay, now it's starting to make a little bit more sense. It's like, okay, this is the specific place that we're actually going to be putting and clicking and, all the buttons around targeting, okay? So with that being said, let's go now and talk about some of the options that there are available specifically within Facebook and Meta's platforms in terms of actual targeting. Okay, so now that we understand what targeting is, how targeting works, what part of the ad account we're actually going to be selecting targeting, which is at the ad set level, let's now explore some of the options that we have in order to actually target. Okay, so again, in just a second, literally right after this section, we're going to go into a walkthrough. So we're going to go ahead and pull up the ads dashboard. We're going to walk you through exactly practically where all those settings are. But before we do that, let's go ahead and go over some screenshots so that way you can mentally prepare ahead of time. Okay, so once you're actually inside of the ad platforms, there's going to be a screen that looks like this. I'm going to show you where that screen is, okay? And you can see here on the left side, it gives us a structure of what's going on here, right? So you'll see on here that we have a blank test campaign, and then we have one ad set. So you'll see on here, it's kind of like a hierarchy, right? It's going like a line slanted over here. So it goes campaign. And then after that, we have an ad set. So we have a blank test ad set. And then we have a blank test ad within that. So we got one campaign, one ad set, and one ad, okay? And so right now you can see that right now the ad set level is blue, so that means that we are selected on the ad set level. And so you can see that hierarchy mentioned here as well. So we got blank test campaign, and then we got blank test ad set, and then we got one ad right here, right? So that's the structure. And right now we are in the ad set level. Now there are many different sections within the ad set level, right? We're just scrolled over here specifically to the audience section. And once we actually go through the walkthrough, and we'll go ahead and do a over-the-shoulder screen share, I'll walk you through some of the other settings on there, and then down the road in upcoming trainings, we'll actually go through and talk about what all the settings are. But specifically, I want to talk to you about this audience section that is here on the ad set level, right? So here on this audience section, you're going to see that there's a bunch of different settings. And then on the right side, we have a couple other metrics like estimated daily results, and then we have audience definition, and then estimated audience size. And so let me go ahead and go over to another screenshot here that has an overlay, so that way you can see some of the different sections that are within the actual audience section, right? Some of the different options that are on here, right? So on that audience section that we had made red earlier, you'll see on here that targeting options that we have is custom audience, right? So we can select a custom audience. We can select location, okay? And we're going to go through and actually show you what types of locations we can select. We can go ahead and select age groups. We can select genders. We can select inbuilt detailed targeting. Don't worry, you're going to understand more of that here in just a little bit. And then you can also select languages, right? And so there are really 6 main buckets of different audience targeting options that are available inside of the actual ad platform. Okay, so this is the initial screenshot that I wanted to walk you through. But hey, even the initial screenshot isn't as good as a proper over-the-shoulder screen share walkthrough. So let's go ahead and really do that right now, because now that you have that kind of theoretical understanding, this is going to make a lot more sense for you. So with that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cut over to a split screen that's going to walk you through what all of these options are and what they actually look like, and we'll go through some of the explanations of them as well. So let's go ahead and cut over to that now. All right, welcome to this quick Facebook targeting options walkthrough. So I'm not going to go into super detail in terms of how to be able to get to this specific screen that we're about to go to right now. I just want to go ahead and explore with you what those options look like. And then in an upcoming training section, we'll actually go step by step on how to actually get to this part of the ads manager. But again, right now, you just want to understand the concept and then 30,000 foot overview. So that way you're getting a feel and getting your feet wet of what all of this looks like. Okay, so basically, whenever we want to get to the section where we got to look around with the targeting, like we said, that happens at the ad set level. And so what we can do, and this is going to be something that we walk you through. Now, you do not need to do this, and actually you should not do this at this point in the training, because we're going to walk you through how to be able to do this specifically, okay? But basically what you're seeing on here right now is the actual Facebook ads dashboard, or the meta ads dashboard, okay? And so like we talked about before, there are campaigns, there are ad sets, and then there are ads. And then obviously within campaigns, there are many, many different ad sets. And then inside of ad sets, there are many, many different ads. But again, I'm not going to explain this too much right now, because we will go ahead and dive into it in the future a little bit more. Okay, so what I'm going to do here right now is I'm actually just going to go ahead and create a blank campaign right now. Okay, so right here, I'm just going to go ahead and create blank test campaign. Again, don't worry, you should not do this right now, because we are going to walk you through how to do this in the future. But just a heads up, right? We create a campaign objective. Typically we do leads because we're trying to do a conversion campaign. However, depending on the strategy or the type of business, there are different campaign objectives that you will learn about. And then we have all of these right here. So you can see on here, it's kind of like a hierarchy, right? Campaign, ad sets, ad. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and continue. And then once I continue, it's going to go ahead now and open up the actual panel. So you'll see on here, if I click on this X, right, it shows me this is where we were before. It now has this specific campaign, test ad set, and ad inside of it. And then if I go over to the ad set level and then I go ahead and click on edit, it has this panel that shows up. And then specifically on this panel, what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. You'll see there's a whole bunch of different settings inside of the ad set level. And then I'm going to scroll down over here. And what we're looking for is specifically the targeting options inside of the ads platform. And the targeting options are going to happen right here at the audience section. Okay, so this is kind of like the screenshot that we were showing earlier, but this is that specific section now. Okay, now over here, obviously there are custom audiences, locations, then there is age, then there is gender, then there's detailed targeting, and then there is languages. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you, and we have a little bit of a guide here that we're going to go ahead and walk through. So first and foremost, we're going to go ahead and talk about locations. Okay, so let me see if I can zoom in here a little bit for you guys, and we're going to go ahead and click on edit for locations. Now the cool thing about locations is that we can pretty much target like anywhere across the entire world. So like, let's say for example, I wanted to run ads, I don't know, let's say hypothetically in the United Kingdom. I don't know, I'm just saying randomly right here, right? So you'll see on here, if I say United Kingdom, it'll give me United Kingdom, the entire country region. It'll give me some specific addresses that apparently are within like Australia and this kind of stuff. So I could target literally the entire country of the United Kingdom if I wanted to. And so you'll now see that I have the United States and the United Kingdom inside of my targeting. Now, in addition to that, what else could I do? So let's say, for example, I take the United Kingdom out, I take the United States out, and you know what? I only want to target, let's see if I can target the state of Texas alone. So you'll see on here, only the state of Texas I can now target. So pretty much everyone that lives in the state of Texas, I can now target. And then of course that would be based off of, the age and then the gender and then those who might like a certain, interest or a demographic. And we'll get into these in just a second, and the language obviously from there, right? And so I wanted to show you the country, right? And so we can target by country, by region, by state, by province, by zip code. And the other thing that's very important to note over here is that we do have this section browse. So we can see, all of the different countries, we can see all of the different regions. And then on top of that, you'll see that we have this drop down here. And this drop down over here says people living in or recently in the location, people living in this location, people recently in this location, or people traveling in this location. Now, primarily what we normally want to do, and I will go ahead and remind you of this later on, but you want to kind of take a note of this, is that we do want to prioritize, and not just prioritize, we want to select people living in this location, right? And the reason why we want to do that, whether that be Texas, United Kingdom, United States, whatever it is because of the fact that people recently in this location, that's based off of the geo-targeting based off of their Facebook or Instagram app, right? And so they might be traveling there, they might be this, but we want to find people who are actually living in this location, okay? So that's a very important setting that belongs there. So you want to understand where that setting is, right? So we're under locations here, we hit edit, and then you'll see on here, we have this section here, and then we have the ability to go ahead and add our locations there. A couple other points I want to go ahead and show you is that we can go ahead and actually target zip codes as well, right? So again, I'm not saying that we are going to do this and that you are going to do this. Typically, we normally run national ads, but I want to show you, right? Let's say, for example, we're running ads for a local business, or, we're helping, a local gym or whatever it might be, right? So let's say, for example, I type in the old zip code of where I was born and raised over in Dr. Phillips, Orlando, Florida, right? And so right over here, you'll see I am now targeting a specific zip code inside of Orlando, Florida, okay? And then I can go ahead and type in, I believe it's 32837. Let's see if I can get that as well. I think that should be the neighboring. Yep. So I skipped one in between. I don't remember exactly what that was, but you can see we can target specific zip codes as well. And I know there's another one, 32805. Let's see if that one, that'll be another zip code somewhere right there, right? So all of these are different zip codes that I'm remembering, but again, you can see how we can target specific zip codes. And then what you will notice here on the right side is that it will also go ahead and give us an estimated audience size of what actually matches all of these criteria. Now, keep in mind, right now we're messing around with the location, but this estimated audience size is also including things like gender. So if I go over here and I type in men, you'll see that that audience size, does it change? 28,000. Yep, you see, so it did change, right? And then obviously the ages. And then if I go in and add a detailed targeting, which I'm going to show you in just a second, where we can go in and target, people with financial income of, top 5%, top 10%, right? People who are, have a master's degree, people who are in college, right? And so you're really going to start to get a very good understanding of like, whoa, wait a second. And especially if you've never done internet marketing before, if you've never done online advertising before, if you've never done direct response marketing before, you're going to say like, wow, this is literally like playing video games on like cheat code mode or like God mode. If you remember back in the day, you get like, let's say you're playing like Grand Theft Auto or some kind of open world video game, and then all of a sudden you have all the cheat codes. It's like, wait a second, this almost seems like I'm cheating. It almost seems like, wait a second, I want to target all of the parents who have, children who are adult children, people who have preschoolers. Like you can literally target very, very, very granularly exactly who you're looking to. But again, we're skipping ahead a little bit. I just wanted to show you what that estimated audience size would look like. And so you can see that we can actually go ahead and target based off of zip code. Okay, so that is the locations feature. So what we're going to go ahead and do right now is I'm going to go ahead and clear this out, and I'm going to go ahead and put United States again. Okay, so this is going to be people living in the United States. That's who we're going to go ahead and target just for this example. And then after that, we're now going to go ahead and go over to the age. And so let's say, for example, we wanted to target, I don't know, menopausal women, right? Then there would be a specific age group for that audience, right? Now, it's very important to understand, I'm going to have this warning in multiple places. We will, in a second, later on inside of the training, talk about a warning around how you do not want to get super, 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 super specific. When I say super specific, you don't want to be like, okay, I'm going to target somebody who lives in the zip code 32836, who is exactly 37 years old, and they are women and they speak Spanish, right? And then you got like an estimated target size of like 500 people or something. We do not want to get overly specific, even though we have all of these options. And later on inside of the main training, we will talk more about that. And there are multiple reasons for that. If you get too specific and your target pool is too small, your ads will cost more money. You're going to have to refresh your ads more often. The AI pixel will not work as good. So all of that stuff. Okay. So again, I'm putting a warning on there, and then we'll talk more about it later on. But again, you have that option here depending on if your offer necessitates it, right? So for example, whenever we are marketing some higher ticket courses, let's say for example, our courses or some of our programs or some of our products are maybe, let's say like, $4, $5, $6, $7, $8, $9,000, which is what we have sold in the past. Typically, what are the chances that like an 18-year-old is going to be able to afford that? Very low, right? And so we'll typically make, the age group like 28. And then we want to make sure that all of our students or all of the people who are joining our program have some technology, tech savvy, they're, open-minded, like that kind of stuff. And so we will typically, again, this is a very broad, stereotypical, generalization, but typically we will go ahead and have the max age of our programs be targeting at 28 to 50. Now, a couple important other points to this is that since the iOS 14 update, since ad blockers, and since a whole bunch of changes in the last couple of years, even these estimated audience sizes typically are and can be very incorrect because Facebook's information and data isn't as accurate as it used to be back in the day. That's number one. And then number two, the same thing goes for Meta to target specifically. Like, is there a chance that it targets people who are maybe 55 years old? Yes. And so it's not like as an exact of a science. I would say it's probably like 70 to 80% of an exact science versus before a couple years ago, you're talking about like 90% plus. It was very, 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 very accurate. Okay. So that's just an important point to keep in mind, is that a lot of the pixel is going to be doing the work. And then we're not trying to overly specify exactly what we want here, except for the overall general ranges, which is very important to understand. Beautiful. So that is age. Let's go ahead and now talk about gender. So again, remember, if we are specifically in our offer targeting, let's say men or women, this is where we would go ahead and specify that, right? So if, for example, we are targeting, perimenopausal women, menopausal women in general, obviously we would be selecting women there, and we would have an age group there. And so when we have the warning of not getting overly too specific, that doesn't mean like, oh, I'm targeting, my customer avatar is perimenopausal women, but because, the coaches said I shouldn't be too specific, I'm going to go ahead and put all genders. No, of course, there is a necessity to the targeting that you are doing. And so that's the reason why you would go ahead and select women there. So, right, you have gender there. And then this right here, detailed targeting, this is where I would say probably the most shocking. So yeah, the location is kind of specific. It's pretty cool. Age is gender, it's pretty general. But now let's go ahead and talk about detailed targeting, okay? Detailed targeting is really where a lot of the things get really, really fun. And then we'll go ahead and talk about languages after that. So this is the big interesting section where most of the customization happens. And so let's go ahead and start off with browse, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and select browse. And then underneath browse, we have demographics, interests, and behaviors. Now these three are all different. And obviously, if you go ahead and put your mouse over here under the info button, then there's gonna be some more information. You can learn more there. So obviously, not everybody who runs Meta ads has a coach. And you're fortunate to be able to be going through a program that is educating you on this, but also Meta has their own resources to educate their advertisers if you wanted to go through that as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about demographics. So demographics on here, it says there are education, financial, life events, parents, relationship, and work. And let me see, can I zoom in a little bit more? Maybe I can. Let's go ahead and see over here. I'm going to zoom out. And I want you to be able to see this, okay? Because this is very, very cool. So demographics right over here. And what I'm going to do is let's go into education. And so education allows us to see, education level. I can see people who have, hey, I want to target people who have an associate's degree, college degree, doctorate degree, high school grad. And if I zoom out just a little bit, you will see that it does also give me the estimated size of that population set inside of my location settings. Pretty cool, right? Just wait. We're just on the tip of the iceberg here, right? So again, you can target based off of, hey, show me people who have a master's degree, show me people who have, unspecified, whatever it might be, show me people who have maybe done certain fields of study. So I want to show my ad in front of people who are, marketing operations directors. Check that out, right? It says below 1,000 in our location set here, right? I want to show me people marketing communication specialist, right? I want to show me, schools. Let's say, for example, show me people. And actually, not just show me people, show my ad in front of people who have gone to or have some affiliation with Harvard University, Harvard Law School, Harvard Medical School, right? So you can go ahead and target specifically, right? Let's go to my University of Central Florida. Let's see if it's in there. Yep, there you go, University of Central Florida. Now, here's the thing. It's not like it has a database of every single school in the entire world, okay? So you're not going to 100% always find what it is that you are looking for. However, there is a good chance if it's something that is major, right? Something that is like mainstream, it is going to be in there. So you can see University of Central Florida, UCF is my alumni school, and you can see it gives me the size of those who are in some way, shape, or form people who listed their school as in their Facebook profile. And so this is what we're talking about when we say that Facebook and Meta has all of this data and has all of this information that it can actually pull from. Okay, so going back over here, right? So we went under education level. We talked about fields of study, schools, undergraduate years. Okay, so what is this? This is, I guess, people who are, oh, wow, look at this. This is super interesting. I never knew this either. It's like, apparently this is when they were in their undergraduate. So you could target people based off of a specific kind of age group there, right? That's pretty cool. Let's go back over to browse, demographics. Now we can go into financial. Now, financial is one of those categories that did have a big hit when the US Congress was cracking down on Facebook because they have the data leak and all this stuff, because there used to be a lot more financial information because Facebook was actually purchasing and tapping tapping into all of the bank information and all of the IRS information, right? But since then, financial now, it's still powerful because they do have household income in here. And so let's say, for example, we want to target, in the United States, and they have only the United States zip codes on here because I think that's the access to the information they have, which is, hey, I want to show my ad in front of, the top 10% of zip codes in the United States, to show the top, 5%. And so you can do it based off of income level as well. Crazy, right? Now, after financial, we have life events, right? So you'll see here, we can target based off of anniversaries that are within the next 30 to 31 to 60 days, right? People with a marriage, with a relationship anniversary occurring within the next 31 to 60 days. How crazy is this? Look at that, right? Anniversary, people who are away from family right now, people who are away from their hometown. Look at this, people whose birthday is upcoming, people whose birthdays are in a specific month. Check that out. Now we're talking here, right? People who are friends of men with a birthday in, so you can then target, and let's say, for example, you're running an ad for a local, restaurant or something like that. You could go in here and say, show this ad, which is going to be like a birthday special for everybody whose birthday is in this month, and then also to the friends of those who are in the birthday of this month. And then you could create an ad that'll be like, hey, your friend's birthday is in this month, and you can go off of that, right? Friends of people with the birthday in this month, in this week, right? So you can go ahead and target it based off of that. People who are in a long distance relationship, interesting, very interesting. People who've recently started a new job, a new relationship, newly engaged 1 year, 3 months, 6 months, newlyweds, recently moved, right? So all of this is data around the targeting that we can actually use in order to go ahead and put our ads in front of those individuals. Pretty crazy, right? Now, I know right now this entire kind of walkthrough is designed to go ahead and kind of open your mind as to what's possible. And then later on inside of the main training, we will talk about like, hey, don't get overwhelmed. There is a scientific way on how we're actually going to go through this targeting. So that way you're not just overwhelmed with like, oh, who should I target? There's too many things to target, like all that stuff. We'll talk about it later on, but I just want you to know how specific and accurate all this information is, right? So parents, you can go into parents, right? All parents, show this to parents with children, parents with teenagers, parents with toddlers. All of that is stuff that we can target, right? Let's go into relationships over here. We can go into their relationship status, right? Are they complicated, civil union, divorced, domestic partnership, married, open relationship, separate, single, widowed, like all of that is, data that we have to be able to put ads in front of those people, right? Work based off of what industry that they work in, based off of who their employers might be, based off of their job titles. All of that is just under demographics, right? So now we have demographics out of the way. Next up after that is we have interest. So people who are interested in, right? This is more of like psychographics. People who are interested in maybe like business and industry, entertainment, fitness and wellness, people who are interested in hobbies and activities, technology. So we have all of that. And then behaviors, right? People who, again, anniversary, but this is like whether or not they are likely to take an action. So the other one over here was demographics, whether they have an anniversary or not. But this is now behaviors around if they have their anniversary, are they likely to take action as a result of that, right? So behaviors over here, purchasing behaviors, do they purchase? So are they actual purchasers or not, right? So remember, Facebook has the information to know if the psychographics of that individual is that if they are a buyer or not, right? Because there are certain types of people on social media. There are people who are clickers, there are people who are buyers, there are people who just opt in and never actually do anything with that, right? And so how does the AI know all that information? By tracking all of that. And so it can then match, okay, these group of people are actual buyers, these group of people are people who do these behaviors. All of that is what they can actually do. Furthermore, right? So then over here it goes consumer classification. They got consumer classification, digital activities. I don't know what a lot of these things, like I myself, and we have not explored this, right? Soccer fans, more categories, like all of this is in here. Now, this is just from the browse category. How crazy is that, right? That is only from the browse category that we wanted to talk about, okay? So interests, obviously we talk about pain and paradise points, education, all that kind of stuff, okay? Now, check this out. We're about to go another layer deeper, okay? The other option that we can play around with around here under detailed targeting is manual search. So what we can do is we can go ahead and search up people who might be interested in certain brands, organizations, public figures, influencers. Now, you're not always going to find what it is that you are looking for. Typically, you are going to find brands that are over a certain size, right? Or maybe sometimes certain brands may not be searchable on the actual platform, but let me show you what we're talking about here, right? So let me go ahead and see, I want to show my ad in front of people because my ad, let's say for example, my product or my offer or my ad is something related to like, fitness apparel or something. So let's say for example, let's see if Lululemon is in here, right? So Lululemon, there we go. So check that out, right? So I have Lululemon and it shows me that, hey, show this in front of people who listed their employer as Lululemon, okay? Or, and this is the one we're looking for, is people who have expressed interest or liked any pages that were Lululemon or pages that were related to Lululemon. And then I can go ahead and click on that. And now it's actually going to show my ads in front of those specific people. And so now we have certain psychographics that we could be targeting from there. What else? What else can we go into, right? So literally, and then we can go into like, let's say influencers, right? I think there's like Dr. Oz. Let's see, Dr. Oz, which is a television show. Let's say like Ellen DeGeneres. Is she in here? Yep. So Ellen DeGeneres, the comedian, right? So you'll see that she is on here. Also the television show that's on here. Let's say maybe some, let me see, Tom Brady. Is he in here? Let's see. Yep. There we go. Tom Brady, the American football player, right? So anybody who's expressed interest or liked pages that were related to Tom Brady, right? I can show my ad in front of those specific individuals. I think, let's say LeBron James for basketball is probably in here. Yep. LeBron James for basketball is in here. It gives me the target size audience from there. Maybe people have showed interest in the NBA. Let me see. Yep. NBA finals, NBA playoffs, right? So the 2K series, the video game, check that out, right? So there's like video games in here as well. And so this is what we're talking about in terms of the power of manual search. Literally, there are unlimited number of targeting options and variations that could be potential on here, okay? Now, let's go even deeper than that. Let's go into, let's say, option number 3, which is manual search plus suggestions. Now, this is a very powerful tool that can be used to tap into Facebook's data, to tap into Meta's data, to see what Meta says is similar. So let's say, for example, I was doing, let's say, Lululemon, right? Let's go back to that Lululemon example where it's an athletic apparel company, okay? Boom. Now, I'm racking my head. I'm trying to do some research, and you're going to learn how to do some of this market research in upcoming trainings as well. But let's say, for example, I was like, you know what? I can't think of what else, who else might be, like, what else might they be interested in? I want to target more than just Lululemon, right? I can then go ahead and click on suggestions, and it is now going to go ahead and give me, according to Meta's data, what are the similar interests to the one that I have actually entered in here. So you'll see here it says Fabletics. I would have never thought about Fabletics. I would have never even wondered Fabletics. And here it is as a suggestion for me, right? Sportswear, activewear, this is kind of like a general interest. This is a brand, Under Armour, Peloton, Athleta, right? All of these, Nike, SoulCycle, all of these are coming in as related to this specific page. How crazy is that, right? And so now what we're doing is we're doing manual search plus the suggestions. And so it's very, very useful for us to do and use this when we're doing our market research. So that way we know what we can actually target and create a list of potential ideas that we can target for our ads. Pretty cool, right? I know, right? And so that's what we said. The detailed targeting really is where a lot of the magic is happening here, okay? Now, another option I want to show you what we can do here with the detailed targeting is the narrowing of the actual audience by using something called layered targeting, okay? Audience layering. And how we actually do this is, let's say, for example, we wanted to target gym owners, right? So let's see, is it possible for us to target gym owners? So let's find out, right? So if I say gym owner, so we can say small business owner, but I can't target gym owner. So how are we actually going to do this? How are we going to target gym owners specifically? And this is where you can actually get pretty creative, especially for maybe those niches or niches that are a little bit harder or smaller to target, right? So we could say, hey, show this ad in front of people who are interested in physical fitness, right? Let's say hypothetically physical fitness, and then maybe they're also interested in, I don't know, let's say Planet Fitness, right? Which is a company, but they're interested in Planet Fitness right here. So I want to be careful, right? They have Planet Fitness Employer. I don't want to select that, not Animal Planet, but Planet Fitness, the interest is what I'm looking for, right? So people who are interested in both of these, right? And so this is like, there's an overlap. This one is 7.6 million. This one is 678 million. So that's huge, like very, very big one, right? So cool. We have this, but then what we can do is we can click on narrow audience. And then I want to say also matches small business owner, right? So let me put small business owner here, and it'll be right over here. So it'll be small business owner, right? And so now it'll actually target and say, okay, include people who match. And I can go ahead and see, you see if I put my mouse over this info button, it'll give you more information over here. So make sure you are being resourceful and not being a spoon-fed student over here, right? There's a lot of information that's out there. We are not the only people on the planet that actually talk about being able to run meta ads, okay? So over here, people who match any of these, but then who also match, and this is narrowing of the audience, right? Who also match a specific kind of, another specific kind of criteria there, right? And so this is a way that we could get kind of creative to be able to get in front of people, because what are the chances of people who are really interested in fitness, but then are also small business owners. There's might be a good chance there, and it's worth testing, right? We don't know. Ultimately, when it comes to internet marketing, everything is just like, hey, we don't know. We don't have the answers. We just got to test, right? And so we got to run an ad that's for gym owners, and then we got to see like, hey, what does the data look like? Does it convert? What's the metrics? All of that kind of stuff. But you're getting an idea of how we can actually use these features in terms of narrowing, excluding, narrowing further, all of this stuff, right? And then over here, this is called advanced detail targeting. Right here, this is a feature that Meta is playing around with. Some accounts have them, some accounts do not have them. But this is basically where Meta will say, you know what, give us the permission to be able to expand your audience according to what we think might actually improve your performance. But then a lot of times, this is kind of just a cash grab for them, where they'll expand your audience and it'll just not be as accurate, and so you won't get as good results around that. So typically we do leave this off, okay? And so that really is some of the options. And again, there's just so many different options. Just wanted to open your eyes and walk you through what some of those options could be here under detailed targeting. And again, detailed targeting, a lot of people also do refer to it as interest targeting, is kind of the section of where it's at. So let's go ahead and I want to cancel this, and I want to leave this kind of generic over here, detailed targeting. And I want to talk to you about languages over here, okay? So languages, which is the final section here under audience. Obviously, if I put my mouse over the eye icon, the information icon there, you'll see some information there. But right here, what's happening is that I can target people, let's say, who are speaking English, right? Or, and this is not just speaking English, what this specifically is, and you should know what these buttons actually mean, is that it's people who are browsing Instagram or Facebook using the, let's say, Spanish version of that app, right? Or people who are browsing using the English version of that app. And so let's say, for example, you are targeting people, let's say in the United States, it's a good idea to have it be English. So that way it's specifically that. Versus, let's say, for example, you are trying to reach, let's say, a Spanish demographic, then it would be cool. Like, hey, you're trying to reach people who are using the app, Instagram or Facebook, in the Spanish version of it, right? And so let's say, for example, you're targeting that specifically, that is how you would go in and actually change that. Beautiful. With that being said, now we've talked about detailed targeting, we've talked about languages, we've talked about gender, we've talked about age, we've talked about location. That really is most of the settings on here. We've also talked about the estimated audience size. Now, in general, we're going to talk about some rule of thumbs later on when we actually get into the market research. But in general, we want to make sure when we're running ads, our estimated audience size is at least 250,000. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that we will go over in upcoming trainings as well. But of course, in certain niches, in certain niches or locations, that may not always be possible. So it's not really the end of the world if we can't get that to 250,000. However, it is a good practice to do, okay? And then finally, there is one more section over here that I wanted to show you, which is the custom audience section. Now, because this is a brand new ad set, you'll see if I put my mouse over custom audiences, it doesn't give me any option to create a custom audience. And we're going to go over some of the reasons of what custom audiences are, why you're not able to go ahead and start off with custom audiences. And a lot of that has to do with you just collecting more and more data, so you have something that you can create a custom audience off of, okay? And so I'm not going to go into that right now. There's going to be a main section training on that. And then specifically later on, once you get to the point where you are able to use custom audiences, we will go ahead and walk you through how to be able to do that as well, okay? So ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, this has been the walkthrough of the actual audience portion of an ad set, what it actually looks like, how it actually works, and all of the different features. And again, you can see an insane number of targeting options that are available inside of Meta's platform in terms of getting your ad in front of the right people. And this is the reason why we say that this is one of the three major variables, right? Ad copy, ad creative, and targeting are the three variables that make up your ad, because you might have amazing ad copy, amazing ad creative, but if it's being shown to the wrong audience, the wrong targeting, then it's not going to get the results that you are looking for, okay? So that is the Facebook targeting walkthrough. We just wanted to blow your mind a little bit, especially if you're new to this entire internet marketing world, so that way you can really start to see how insane and how specific and how many options there are for targeting. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and cut back over to the main training. All right, welcome back from that quick walkthrough on the Facebook targeting option. So yep, as you can see, there are a crazy amount of options that are not only inbuilt within Facebook, but then also there's like languages and like ages and all that stuff that we just went over right now, right? So the other question that I want to kind of go over here, now that you understand the overview and the walkthrough of all of the different options that are on there, is specifically I want to talk to you about inbuilt targeting versus custom lookalike targeting, okay? Because now that we understand, okay, these are kind of the buckets and the options for targeting, it's a very common question to ask, okay, well, hey, which of these are we actually going to prioritize? Like, how is all this going to work? Like, what's the overall strategy for this, right? So like we saw in the walkthrough, there's a section that is called custom audiences, and there's a section that is called detailed targeting, right? So we had a section that was called custom audiences and a section that was called detailed targeting, or what is also known as inbuilt detailed targeting, okay? Now, the reason why these are the two main targeting options is because, yes, we have things like location and age and gender and language, but the truth is that most of the time, these other settings are going to be pretty standard based off of the offer, right? So for example, you're not going to be targeting like some random countries in Europe or something like that, right? Typically, you're going to be targeting United States and Canada. Simple as that, right? Because typically if you're targeting like UK, Australia, it's like different time zones, tough to get on calls with people, all that kind of stuff, right? So typically you're going to be targeting United States and Canada. Age range, so if you're like, for example, targeting, perimenopausal women or something, there's going to be a very specific age range for that versus if you're targeting, let's say, young professionals, there's an age range for that, right? Versus if you're going a little bit more mass market, right? You're going a little bit more, interchangeably, then you might obviously go a little bit larger. So typically maybe around 25 to 60 is going to be the age range. So that's going to be pretty standard there, right? And then the other thing is gender. Like the gender is going to be based off of the offer as well. So for example, if you're targeting perimenopausal women, obviously you're just going to be targeting women. Like for the history of your offer that you are running, you're going to be targeting one specific gender versus if you're targeting just young professionals, it's going to be all, and you just keep it on that, right? Versus if you're targeting fathers, right? It's going to be men and you just keep it on that. So these are very standard once you actually get them dialed in for your specific offer, right? And languages, right? For the vast majority of people, it's going to be, hey, language is going to just be English US or whatever it is. And so as you can see, all these other settings, once we kind of have them in place, they're kind of just rinse and repeat. We just use the same settings over and over and over again. But where the customization happens, where the changes happen based off of each ad set, each test, all of that kind of stuff is really happening here on either the custom audience targeting level or within the inbuilt detailed targeting level. Okay, now let me go ahead and expand this a little bit more so you can kind of refresh yourself on that. So here on the inbuilt detailed targeting, that is where we actually go in and say, okay, cool, show me people who are interested in LeBron James, show me people who have this demographic, show me these people who have this interest, show me these people who have this behavior, right? And then here on the custom audience targeting, this is more of like our own data. So the data that was collected via our pixel, this is the data that we are feeding in via records, and then we are getting a lookalike audience based off of that. And I'll go ahead and explain that here in just a second in terms of what custom audience targeting is. But I want you to just understand that, cool, inbuilt targeting, that is like Facebook's data that they already have, and we're just tapping into that, versus custom targeting is more of the data that either we have collected or we have uploaded, and then we are either targeting that exact amount of people or that exact group of people, or we are targeting a lookalike of the audience that we have gone ahead and either uploaded or collected via our pixel. So let's go ahead and actually double click and talk about these two in a little bit more detail other than just the explanation that we just provided, right? So again, in the custom audience section, there are kind of two options. You can either do lookalike audiences or you can do custom audiences, okay? And I'm gonna explain that here in just a second. And then obviously detailed targeting, inbuilt targeting, that's kind of straightforward, right? It's just, hey, interest targeting, right? LeBron James, people are interested in LeBron James, demographics, behaviors, that kind of stuff. But specifically the one that's more confusing, because inbuilt detailed targeting, that kind of makes sense, that, I understand that. But what is custom lookalike audiences? Let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about that so that we can understand the difference there. So then we can go ahead and make a decision and say, okay, which one, as a beginner or maybe somebody who's more advanced or XYZ, which one are you going to be actually working with initially, right? Are you starting with inbuilt detailed targeting, or are you starting with custom audience targeting, or both? What's going on here, right? So let's talk about that. So custom lookalike audiences, what those are, it's basically where the AI pixel has been trained or has learned enough data or records, right? Usually at least 300 to 600, usually 1,000 plus, right? It needs more data, right? So that way, once the AI pixel has been trained on that data, it can go out onto the ad platform's billion plus person audiences, right? Depending on if you're advertising on Facebook. Obviously, Meta's platforms are going to be both Facebook and Instagram, and then Google's are going to include YouTube, right? So it's typically either Meta or Google, right? So what it can do is once that pixel has learned on that information, it can actually go into the audiences and actually find people who match those records. Now, obviously, Meta is not going to be able to tap into Google's, and Google's not going to be able to tap into Meta, but those are two separate ad platforms depending on where you're advertising, right? And so these are the two ways in which we can actually get that data into the ad platforms, okay? So either we can go ahead and input the data back to the ad platform, right? Either Meta or Google via the server, okay? Which is actually as we spend the ad spend, okay? I'll talk to you more about that in just a second. Or we can input the data back via a manual upload, okay? What's the difference between the two there, okay? So the first one is sending the data back through the server, okay? So as you are spending money on ads, and as people are taking actions on your landing page and then they book a call and then they become a customer, right? You can send all of that data back to the ad platforms via the API, right? And we've already gone through some explanations on this and how to set it up, right? So you've seen practically, tactically, what that looks like, right? You have the workflow and then you send the data back via that way and then you test it and all that kind of stuff, right? So you can set up multiple workflows to send multiple different types of events that are going on, right? Not only the lead event, but you can send, hey, when somebody books a call, send that information back over the ad platform. Hey, when somebody becomes a customer, send that data back over to the ad platform, right? Through Stripe, do this, do this, do this. You can do all of that, right? Now, this one is the highest quality data because what happens is the ad platforms through the server and through the API, they can actually match users based off of advanced data points, right? So the basic data points are like name, email address, phone number, like that kind of stuff, okay? So that's the basic information. But when you're sending data through the server and the API, because you have that pixel that is collecting that data, that information is also included with some advanced parameters like IP address, click ID, and other important data that allows the ad platforms, even with a small number of data sets, they can actually match. Because what they're doing is these ad platforms are having to match what that data looks like to which users, right? So they're matching them to certain Facebook accounts, certain Instagram accounts, or in Google's case, they're matching them to certain Gmail addresses, YouTube users, all that kind of stuff, right? So the more data that they have, right? Email addresses, phone numbers, names, but hey, somebody might have a similar email address or they might have a similar name, right? They might have these things or a lot of people might not have their maybe phone number uploaded into the system. So they have to rely on IP address or click ID or these other things. And so the more advanced parameters that the ad platforms have, the higher likelihood they are able to actually match it, number one. And then number two, find and extrapolate trends based off of, hey, these 100 people share these psychographics and these demographics. Let's go ahead and now find other people who are like that, right? So that's option number one. Then option number two is either manually uploading the data back over to the ad platforms, right? So if somebody who is, let's say, for example, advertising fresh, they haven't yet spent a bunch of money on the ad platforms and then be able to get that server data and through the API, right? Because the only way that you can get this first option is by actually spending money on the ad platforms, because the leads have to come from the ad platforms, get over to your landing pages, become customers, and then send the information to the API. You can't send information through the API that hasn't already been taken place, right? And so if somebody's starting advertising fresh, and maybe they've already been in business, right? They've already spent all of this money acquiring data through other means, right? Maybe they were doing like word of mouth, organic, like whatever it is, right? They're probably going to have a whole bunch of different data points sitting inside of their CRM, right? So for example, if they're using the client kit, right? Inside of the client kit, they're going to have a massive list, right? That list is money. Like all of that is what is inside of your CRM, right? That is inside of the client kit. That is money because of the fact that there was some effort that had to go through in order to get that list, right? Those names, those email addresses, those phone numbers, right? And then also the context between, okay, hey, this is Susie, and Susie was not only a lead, but she also booked a call. That is money. That is the value of your business, right? And so other people who have been in business in other ways have collected this list, and what they can do is they can actually manually upload that list into the ad platforms, okay? But here's the thing, because that list is not going to have things like IP address and click ID, like those are things that are only collected via servers and APIs, right? So they're probably only going to have in their CRM things like name, email address, and phone numbers, which again are still very, 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 very valuable. Like do not underestimate that, right? Do not underestimate that. However, because it is not as advanced as some of the IP address stuff like that, there are going to need much more records in order for the ad platforms to be able to go out there and find and pull psychographics and demographics, okay? And so for that reason, there's going to have to be a minimum 300 to 1,000 plus because of the fact that it doesn't have some of that advanced information. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention on here is that the advanced information also includes things like where the user was actually clicking, what they were doing, like all of these internal things that are happening there. That is another reason why the ad platforms, with some of that data that comes in from the pixel and the API, they can actually target more trends and psychographics and demographics because it does include more information because of that, okay? So these are the two ways in which a custom lookalike audience can be created. Because here's the thing, once that information is in the ad platforms, okay? So once that information is in the ad platforms, and again, we've talked about the two ways in order to get that information in the ad platforms, regardless of which of the two ways is utilized in order to get the information into the ad platforms, once the ad platform, once the AI, once the pixel has enough of those records, what it can then do is utilize that information that has been uploaded about the users, about the customers, about the leads, the booked calls, the applications. It can utilize that to go out and find more of those types of people, okay? That is what custom lookalike audiences actually are, okay? So now that you understand that, let me go ahead and show you that visual again of what it looks like in the actual platform, right? So we talked about over here, we talked about custom audience targeting, okay? And we talked about inbuilt detailed targeting, okay? The explanation that we just did when we talked about the data that's going into the ads platforms and all that kind of stuff, that is what we are talking about when we talk about the custom audience targeting, okay? Because when you actually click on the custom audiences option there, you're going to see that it has lookalike audiences and it has custom audiences. And then underneath there, it has like, okay, hey, show me all the people that engaged on my Instagram. Show me all the people that engaged on my website. Show me a lookalike of the people who did strategy sessions and quick chats with me minus the non-qualified people, right? So these are the very high qualified people who did strategy sessions and quick chats with me. Well, hey, I'm going to go ahead and upload that into the ad platform if I have at least 300, 600, 1,000 strategy sessions, which again, takes time in order to get to. But if you have that list, you can then create a lookalike based off of that list. And then the ad platforms can go out there and find more of those people. Okay, so now that we understand that, beautiful. The question is, well, hey, which targeting method are we actually going to utilize? Are we going to be using custom audience targeting, or are we going to be using the inbuilt detailed targeting when we are starting out? And the answer to that question is that when we are starting out, we are going to be starting with the inbuilt detailed targeting, okay? Now, the question is, why is that the case? The reason why that's the case is because in order to be able to create that custom lookalike audience, like we talked about, we need 100, 300, 1,000 records, and really the bigger the better, especially if you're going to be looking at creating a lookalike audience off that. So we need 100, 300, 1,000 records of website visitors, leads, buyers, appointments, like that kind of stuff, right? Now, it might be easier to be able to get, 300 to 1,000 website visitors, but building a lookalike audience or a custom audience off of website visitors is going to be less quality than if we were to go ahead and build a lookalike audience based off of 300 or 1,000 leads, right? Because imagine, leads are people who've actually given you their name, email address, and phone number. So if you tell the ad platforms, hey, here are 300 to 1,000, let's just use an even number. Let's just use 1,000, right? So if you say, hey, here are 1,000 people that have given me their name, email address, and phone number, go out there and find more people like that. The ad platform's like, all right, cool. Like I have something to work with. But then here's the thing. The next level of that is going to be appointments, right? People, I'm going to skip buyers over here. Here are 1,000 people that have booked an appointment with me. Well, guess what? That's an even higher quality set of data that you're giving, right? Because it doesn't just mean that, hey, if somebody gives you their name, email address, and phone number, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are the type of person who's going to become an appointment, right? And then guess what? If I gave the ad platforms, here are the name, email addresses, and phone numbers, or the server side, API data of 1,000 buyers. Well, guess what? That is literally the highest quality because, hey, if you give it 1,000 buyers, then it's going to say, cool, you have now given me the exact psychographics and the exact demographics of the people who are buyers. And so you can see on here that it's going to be different quality sets. And so the more deeper you can go in the actual strategy of your sales process, the higher quality information is going to be. But in order to acquire that data inside of your CRM, inside of the client kit, inside of your API, inside of all of that, it is going to take more time, and you're going to have to be in business for a longer period of time. And so this is the reason why, especially in internet marketing, the longer that you are in business, the longer you stick to something, the longer you stick to that customer avatar. Because imagine if you just got shiny object syndrome and then every 6 months you're just like niche hopping or you're just jumping around, well, it's going to take you longer to be able to develop really the value of your business is that list that you have in your CRM, in the pixel data, and all of that stuff, right? And so the reason that we are starting with inbuilt targeting is because in order to create that custom lookalike and have 100, 300, 1,000 records of all of these different things, it's not going to happen if you are just a beginner in the beginning, right? Because your list is too small. The number of leads that you have is too small. The number of buyers that you have is even smaller than that. The number of appointments that you have is too small, right? And so what would happen is if your data set is too small, the pixel does not have enough information to find the people, okay? And so again, for most of you who are just starting out, you haven't been in business long enough to have all of those records in your CRM inside of your TCK. And for that reason, in the beginning, we are putting a pause on being able to use custom audiences and lookalike audiences, right? Regardless of if that's inputting data via the server or inputting data manually and uploading that, okay? Now, the beautiful thing about this is the fact that you have server-side tracking set up, and we already went ahead and set all of that up with server-side tracking, right? As you're doing more and more business, this side is automatically being sent over to the ad platforms. And then over time, later on, you can go in and manually upload these as well. Now, I will also go ahead and mention, though, there are cases, for example, that if somebody was doing marketing or was in business for a very long period of time, or not even very long period of time, if they were in business for, let's say, 6 months or a year, but again, depending on how big they were scaling and how quickly they were scaling, right? There are cases in which they would already have those lists, right? So for example, if I was working with, let's say I was consulting with a company that was very aggressive in their scaling, and within the first 6 months, they had already acquired, let's say 500, 1,000, 10,000 users or customers, then they would already have a list, right? And so then from day number 1, they could go ahead and start using custom lookalike audiences and get great results with custom lookalike audiences out from the gate, right? And so in that case, that company who had already had that list, who had already been in business, who had already been aggressive in the acquisition, right? They would not only be able to use inbuilt detailed targeting, they could use that by itself, and they would also be able to use custom audience targeting and or a combination of the two, okay? And so that's an example case that I wanted to run by you. But for the vast majority of you, when we're just starting out, we are going to be putting a pause on that custom lookalike audiences and custom audiences in general, okay? And that's fine because typically inbuilt detailed targeting can perform just as good as custom audiences. So I don't want you to get into some scarcity mindset and be like, oh, I can't be successful because I can't do custom audience targeting. Well, how the heck do you think anybody got started, right? Like not everybody got started with a list. So you got to get started with what you have, right? That's the number one rule of entrepreneurship is, hey, you got to get started with what you have. And then as you go along, you're going to get more and more resources, and then you can be able to do more and more things. So again, as a recap, this section right here, which is the custom audience section inside of the ad set, specifically on the Meta platform for running ads, we are not going to be touching that. We're going to put a pause on that. And we are primarily doing all of our customization, right? All of our testing is going to be happening here in the inbuilt detailed targeting section, right? We're going to do all of that over here. And then down the road, once we actually have enough information, we have enough data, then we can actually start to actually do custom audiences or a combination of custom audiences or inbuilt targeting. Beautiful. Man, oh man, oh man. Right? Targeting is such an important topic. And really, this is where we start to get into the science of advertising, right? Like copy and creative, there's a little bit of an art to it. And yeah, there's a little bit of an art to targeting as well. But really, when we start to get into the actual ad platforms, you're going to see that it's becoming more and more and more and more tactical, right? The closer that we get to launch, it's becoming more and more scientific as it starts to get there, right? And so now you're starting to see like, man, this is literally like there's an unlimited amount of possibilities here, right? And so this is typically where some students who are just getting started out with this be like, man, targeting overwhelm is really starting to be able to hit us, right? It's like, man, this is kind of crazy. Like, hey, there are literally unlimited number of audiences that we could target. So here's a question, like how in the world are we actually going to target them all? Like even with your specific target, right? Even if you say, hey, I'm going to be targeting women in this age range who speak this language, but in that inbuilt detailed targeting, there's literally millions of different targeting options, unlimited number of different targeting options that we could do, right? So how in the world are we going to target all of them, right? Like, hey, women who are interested in Lululemon, women who are interested in XYZ influencer, women who are interested in, XYZ brand. How do we target them all? And the answer to that question is you're not going to target them all, right? Because this is really where the testing actually comes into place. This is really where what's going to happen is that as you go into the action steps of these trainings, and once you get into the action steps of the training section that are upcoming, what's going to happen is that you're going to have a massive list of things that you want to go ahead and actually test one day. And you're going to select a handful, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, depending on your budget. You're going to select a handful and then you're going to go ahead and test that. And then out of that handful, let's say, for example, you test 5, you might find 1 or 2 winners, maybe 3 winners. And then once you have those 3 winners, well, guess what? What you're actually going to be doing is you're going to be running the winners out of those audiences, out of those targeting, until you decide that you want to do more testing, right? So you might have, let's say, for example, 5 initial tests. Out of that 5 initial tests, let's say 3 make the cut, okay? So out of the 3, for example, the 3 are women in the age of, XYZ age who like Nike. I don't know. Nike would be like massive. I probably wouldn't recommend testing it because Nike would be just like literally everybody. But hypothetically, let's say Nike. It could work. I'm just saying Nike, okay? So again, nothing magical, mystical about this. Please, okay? For the love of God, please understand that there's nothing special about Nike. Like I hate it when we're making these trainings and then we mention an example and then all of a sudden there are some students out there that have somehow gotten into their head that this is some mystical example that, the coaches have pulled out of their heads. It's not. It's literally just a random example, okay? So hypothetically, let's say we got Nike, we got, let's say, Lululemon, okay? And then we got another brand. Let's say, for example, we are going to use the NBA, okay? People who are interested in the NBA, okay? 3 different examples. These are the 3, let's say out of the 5, these 3 are the ones that actually worked. Well, guess what? We can continue to run ads within Nike, Lululemon, and NBA pretty much indefinitely because all we would need to do is just change the ad, right? And the ad is made up of the copy and the creative that is going into Nike, Lululemon, and NBA, right? Now, here's the thing. We could run this copy and this creative running into this audience until everybody in this audience has seen this ad, okay, has seen this actual ad. And then we can decide, we got to create a new copy or creative. Now, either we can create a new copy or creative, or we can go out there and do some more testing, right? We test another 5, okay? And then we get another 3 winners. And let's say, for example, these 3 winners are going to be, I don't know, people who like Apple, people who like Walmart, and people who like Amazon. I don't know. I'm just picking stuff, right? Now, instead of us having to create a new copy and creative, instead what we can do is we can take our existing copy and creative, okay, that was getting burnt out in these audiences because all these audiences had seen that ad already. And we can just literally, without having to do any work, just literally take that copy and creative and put it in front of a new group of people. Because remember, there's so many millions and billions of people on the planet, right? Like you can put the same copy and creative in front of a new audience and then get results from that copy and creative, the same copy and creative. Or we would have to go out and create new copy and creative and then show it to the same audience, right? Now, obviously, this is a little bit more strategy oriented that we're going to talk about in upcoming trainings, but I want you to understand, like, hey, this is what that process looks like, right? And so it's not like you are going to have to go out there and literally test every single variation of targeting. We really are just looking for what are the winners, right? So we're going to test a handful, we're going to find the winners, and then once we find the winners, we can either decide to stick with those winners and just run it and then create new copy and creative to put in front of those winning audiences, or we can test new audiences and new targeting and then use the same copy and creative and then put it in front of those other audiences that are out there, okay? And so this is what we're talking about is right now we're in that pre-launch setup, right? And so we're going to be starting with that small number of audiences, and then what's going to happen here is that we're going to take note, like a scientist, of the data around which of those audiences actually wins, aka is proven, versus which one actually fails, right? So we have all of these different audiences, right? We're using our fish pool example again, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to take our copy and creative, and we're going to put it in front of, and initially when we're testing, we don't know if we're in front of the right people. So we might even have terrible copy and creative. And so we have to first verify that. So we got a lot of variables that we have to first, prove out. But once this copy and creative has proven that it actually works, then we can say, cool, you know what? Let's go ahead and put it in front of this other targeting, and we can go ahead and really get a good idea of what's going on here, okay? And so this is going to be the process of us starting with some audiences and then really iterating as we go along here, right? So we've talked about this before. We have our hypothesis, okay? So we're going to say, cool, we have our hypothesis, which is this copy copy, which is this creative, and which is this targeting. And so what we got to do is we then got to put ad spend behind it. We got to put it into the real world. So that way the hypothesis combines with the real world information that we collected, and that is what's going to create the next version, right? So that's the process right there. Then we got version 2, then we go to version 3, XYZ, and we keep on going from there, okay? So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this has been this specific training section, which is all about targeting explained. Now you have a very, very good understanding of targeting. Now we can actually get into the action steps when it comes to targeting. Again, if you have any questions about this or anything that we have discussed, make sure you go ahead and ask inside of the student community, so that way one of the student community members can go ahead and help you. So with that being said, I will catch you in the next training section. All right, the targeting party continues. Inside of this training, we're going to be talking about the targeting research that you will be going through in order to go ahead and come up with your initial inbuilt audiences hypothesis. And so, yes, this is going to be a more action-oriented training. So there's going to be some specific action steps that you're going to be doing in order to make sure that you can go ahead and get your initial targeting research done. And so, yes, we are going to be talking about stage number 1 still, right? So we're all preparing for that stage 2 launch that is going to be up and coming. And then, as you already saw from the title, the targeting research that you're going to be going through is going to be focused on Meta's inbuilt audiences. Okay, so just as a quick recap, why are we starting with inbuilt audiences first? Because remember, we talked about the difference between inbuilt targeting audiences that were inside of the ad set, right? And there was those custom audience targeting that you could create those lookalike audiences. So like we explained in a previous training, it's going to be a minimum of 100, 300, 1,000, and of course, the bigger the better, of things like website visitors or leads or appointments or calls or buyers. Because if the audience that you're uploading, either manually or through the API, is too small, then the algorithm, the AI, the pixel is not going to have enough data to be able to pull those trends and find more of those people. And so that is the reason why we are going to be focusing on the inbuilt detailed targeting. And then that way, as you start to build out your list, as you grow, then you can always go ahead and use custom audience targeting. And we'll go ahead and explain that in a completely different training when you are ready for that, okay? Now, the other quick question before we get into the tactical piece of this is, okay, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and do some research, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and open up a test ad set. I'm gonna show you how to do that. But the question is, how big should my audience be that I am putting on the sheet that you guys provide? And we're gonna provide you some templates for that, okay? So in a previous training, we did talk about when it comes down to targeting, there is just so much information that these social media platforms have about their users, and they have all of this data and all this information on us, right? So when picking an audience, if there's literally millions and millions and unlimited variations of audiences that we could potentially target, which ones should be actually prioritized, right? That's the question. And so even though we have all of these insane ways to do targeting, even though we could get extremely specific, right? We could say, okay, I want to target somebody who lives in this exact area code, in this exact house in the United States, who's exactly, 37 years old, 37 and a half years old, who is a man who is really interested in LeBron James and, does not like Nike, but does like Adidas. And, from there, they also speak English and Spanish, right? Like that might only be like a very, 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 very small number of people in the entire country who meets that criteria, right? Now, the question is, why shouldn't we prioritize highlighting very small numbers of people, right? Shouldn't the audience size be very specific? And the truth is that no, we actually do not want to get too specific with all of these. We don't want to go crazy with all of these options that are on here. Now, why is that the case? Because of 3 main reasons. Number 1, the smaller the audience means that there's less information for the AI pixel to actually pick up on. Number 2, the smaller the audience, the more money you're actually going to have to pay to be able to run those ads. And then the smaller the audience means the more ads that you are going to have to create. Now, let me quickly go ahead and explain these 3. Now, this is a little bit more of kind of like advanced strategy, advanced understanding of how the media platforms work, but I do want to just touch on it and plant those seeds so that way you can understand why this is very important, okay? So number 1, smaller the audience, the less information for the AI pixel. So the AI pixel, also known as the advertising algorithm, what happened is that before the iOS 14 update, as well as there was some crackdown from the US government back when Facebook was involved with some of the election scandal, the the election fraud that was going on, Facebook used to have an insane amount of very specific and accurate information and data on all of these people, okay? But then ever since that iOS 14 update, as well as some of the other events, the amount of data that Facebook has access to in order to target users has become a little bit more limited. Now, when I say limited, I'm not talking about all the stuff that we talked about in the walkthrough and some of those other trainings. That's all still available. I'm talking about years ago, right? You haven't even seen the insane amount of data that Facebook used to have. It used to be really even more than it is right now, right? So right now there's unlimited ways to be able to target people. Back then it was unlimited times unlimited. It was really, really crazy, right? So even though with server-side tracking, right, unfortunately most advertisers are still kind of running on the pixel variation. So the data isn't necessarily as insane as it used to be. However, it is not all doom and gloom, okay? The reason why is because even though there is slightly less data than there used to be, the AI over the last couple of years on these advertising platforms has gotten really, really, really good in pulling out, even off of some of the information that it may be lacking, in pulling out who these people are, what are the trends, and being able to see what's going on. And so because the AI is so good at picking up on those trends, we don't want to minimize the group and audience that we're doing too much, right? Now, obviously we want to minimize it to a point, right? If our offer is specifically only for women, we don't want to tell the AI to go out there and also search for men, right? We want to go ahead and limit it to women, but we don't want to overly get too specific on the audience, right? We don't want to make it too small where it's a tiny audience of 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 people. That's a very, very, very tiny audience. We need an audience of as you're going to see some of our golden rules of thumb, of 250 or maybe even 1 million people. So that way the AI has enough something to work with, so that way it can actually pull out proper trends from there. And so if you are giving a big enough audience and you are doing server-side tracking and you're being able to send that data over to the ad platforms in terms of who is opting in and who's doing all that stuff on your pages, right? Because you do have all that server-side tracking set up, then at that point you can get away with a much bigger audience, 1 million plus person audience, and let the AI pixel algorithm do a lot of the work for you. And so that's the reason why in this new aged AI pixel world, right, that we're living in now, post iOS 14 update and that kind of stuff, we're really relying on the AI pixels that have gotten really good to do a lot of the targeting work for us based off of the information that they have, which is even more than we might have, okay? So that is reason number one, okay? And then reason number two after that is that the smaller the audience, the more money you're gonna pay, okay? So audiences on advertising platforms are kind of like pools of users. And the thing is that the more people that are fishing, right? More fishing poles that are fishing inside of that pond, and the less fish that are in that pond, that's going to cause the price of advertising to actually go up in that specific pond, right? So if you think about it, let's say, for example, if you're talking about, Rodeo Drive in Los Angeles, which is a very high income area, what is the probability that in that zip code, there are a lot of people who are advertising because of the fact that there are very high income individuals over there? Probably very high, right? So what do you think it would cost in order to advertise to that zip code in Rodeo Drive in Los Angeles? Probably a lot of money, right? And so that's what we're talking about, is that depending on, number one, how many fish are inside of the pond, and then number two, how many other fishermen, how many other fisherwomen are out there trying to fish within that pond, it is going to go ahead and change the cost of the advertising. And so if the pond is smaller and there are less fish in order to actually reach, and there are a lot of fishermen who are trying to reach those exact same fish, then the cost of that advertising is going to go up. And so practically, when we talk about what this looks like on the social media platforms, because there is a limited amount of space on the actual news feeds, right? If you think about it, when you open up Facebook or you open up Instagram or you go on YouTube, there can't just be only ads, right? Because if there's only ads, then people are not going to want to go on the platform. So about every 3 or 4 posts on Facebook and Instagram is going to be an ad. And so that means that there's a limited number of places on the news feed, both on Facebook and Instagram, in which ads can be placed. And the same thing, that there's a limited number of spaces on YouTube and Google that ads can be placed. And so for that reason, if you are going after a smaller pool, the competition is going to be higher. And if the competition is higher, you're going to have a higher CPM. Now, CPM stands for cost per milli. Now, milli just stands for 1,000 is in Latin. So it's basically, what is the cost to be able to get your ad in front of 1,000 eyeballs, in front of 1,000 people, right? And so CPM is how we track how expensive it is in order to be able to get your ad in front of that pool of people. Now, you don't have to worry about that right now. We're going to show you where to find CPM, how to track CPM, how to measure CPM, how to know if the audiences that you're going after are very expensive. All of that stuff is later on, right? But for right now, we just want you to know that reason number 2 of why you shouldn't get overly too specific, right? Going back to that example, I'm looking for a 37 and a half year old male who lives in this zip code, who is interested in LeBron James, but not in Nike, right? You don't want to get overly too specific. Of course, if possible, right? In some cases, some people are just going to be going after markets that are a little bit smaller, but if possible, you want to leave it a little bit more broad, so that way you're not having to compete in higher competition audiences. Otherwise, that is going to push the CPM and the price of that traffic up. Now, again, this is generally, not always, because we ultimately have no way to know how many fishermen are actually in that pool and how many fish are exactly in that pool. We only have estimates, but in general, the smaller the pool, the less fish, the cost is going to go up. And so the larger the pool, the cost is going to be a little bit less. Okay, so that is reason number 2. And then reason number 3 is that the smaller the audience, the more ads that you are going to have to create more frequently. Why is that the case? The reason that's the case is because if you have a smaller audience, the more quickly everyone in that target audience is going to see your ad. What does that mean? It means that there's a metric in the ads dashboard that we're going to show you once we actually set up all the columns inside of your ads manager that is called frequency. And we can see what is the frequency of how many times your ad has been shown to the people in that audience. And so you can imagine kind of like right this, right? So you got all of these fish inside of this pond and they're all looking at the same ad, and eventually all these people are going to have already seen the ad. And so you can't just consistently hit the same people with the same ad and they've seen it like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, because then eventually they get banner blindness and they no longer see the ad anymore. It doesn't attract them anymore. And then all of a sudden the cost of your ads is going to go up. So how do you combat this? Is that if your audience is smaller, you have to create more copy and creative more regularly, right? Because ads are made up of what? They're made up of copy, creative, and then you're matching that up to an audience. And so if you're keeping the audience the same, then you're going to have to change the copy and the creative more frequently, okay? And so an example of this is that inside of a, let's say, 10,000 person audience, if you spend, let's say, $1,000, most of the people in that audience, if not all of them, will see your ad at least once for that $1,000, right? Versus if you have an audience that's, let's say, 10 million people, and if you spend $1,000 into that 10 million person audience, barely a small percentage of those people will have actually seen your ad. And so you can continue to spend even more and more and more over a longer period of time because of the fact that that audience is not going to get burnt out, because there's enough new people, there's enough big enough of an audience in order for them to all be spread out. And so that ad can be shown to new and new and new people because the audience is so massive. And that budget that you have, that might be, let's say, $1,000, is going to barely even make a dent inside of that big of a market. And that budget that you have is barely going to make even a dent inside of that big of an audience, okay? And so in a more narrow audience, the ads are not going to last as long because most of the people in the pool will see your ad and the frequency data metric in your ads manager is going to go up, okay? And so those are the 3 reasons why having a super targeted, overly specific, smaller audience is completely unnecessary, and really you do not need to do it. And so that's the reason why some of the rules of thumb that we recommend, okay, now this is not an exact science, it is based off of the estimated audience sizes that are on Facebook and Meta's platform, which really aren't as exact as they used to be, because remember back like a couple years ago, they used to have a lot more precise information. So now there's kind of like estimations, but in general, a good idea is to make sure that your audience sizes are at least 250,000 people, okay? So, however, as Facebook's pixel gets less and less data since the iOS 14 update, it's sometimes even better to aim maybe for slightly bigger than 1 million people for some of the reasons that we talked above, okay? So, at the same time, you don't want to go too big either where it gets too diluted, because some students might be like, okay, you know what, Coach Yassine, you said, you know what, bigger might be better. And so I'm going to go ahead and target, let's say, an audience that has like, 100 million people, 200 million people, 300 million people. You know what, while I'm at it, I might as well just open up my ad to the entire world and then just target literally like, 7 billion people, right? Or let's say, for example, you're going to target, people who like Amazon.com, which might be like 250 million people. Well, the problem with that is that it's just too big and you're not really going to get some good traction on your ad because it's not specific enough and it doesn't call out that specific group of people, okay? So really there is a sweet spot in which we are not getting too specific on the group of people that we're targeting, right? We're not trying to just target that one dude who lives in a random apartment in New York or something like that. And we're not so broad in which we're literally targeting everyone and their grandma, like 30, 100 million people plus, okay? So there is that sweet spot that we are aiming for in between that, okay? So now that you understand a little bit of the mindset behind what that audience size actually looks like, let's go ahead and now talk about the step-by-step for the target research in order to come up with your inbuilt audience list and all of the potential audiences that you could potentially use. So we are going to be doing a split screen for this. So we're going to go ahead and cut over to that mini training now. All right, welcome to this mini training that's going to walk you through the step-by-step of putting your targeting research together for your inbuilt audiences. So let's go ahead and walk through this step by step. So step number 1 is to go ahead and make a copy of the targeting tracker template. So this is going to be a template that's going to be located underneath this training. And what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and open that up. Also, the link is available inside of the guide in case it's not underneath this training. And then what you're going to do is you're not going to be able to edit this template, okay? Just like everything else in this program, we've said this a gazillion times, right? You got to go over to File. Then you got to go ahead and click on make a copy. And then you got to be able to go ahead and make a copy of this. And let's say, for example, I'm doing this for NutriFit. I might call this, NFW, NutriFit Wellness, make a copy. And then now I have my own version of this template, okay? Now, what I'm going to be doing on here is you're going to see that I have some examples for the sake of this mini training, but I am going to go ahead and actually create a new one on here. So I'm going to duplicate this. Now, you do not have to do this. This is for the sake of the mini training that I wanted to go ahead and walk you through this, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and start with a blank slate so that way you can see what's going on here, okay? Now, that's step number 1, is we're going to go ahead and make a copy of this targeting tracker. Now, it's very important that you don't just go ahead and put it in a random Google Drive file just like I just did. I'm just doing this because it's an example. You want to make sure that you actually are organized. We've talked about this many times before, is that as an online entrepreneur, it is so important for you to make sure that you are well organized. You want to put it in the right folder. And FYI, this is going to be a lead generation kind of task. And so you are going to be putting this inside of the lead generation folder. Beautiful. The next step after that is we're going to go ahead and create a blank campaign and a blank ad set. So that way we can actually test if some of the targeting is available in Meta's system or not. Okay, so how are we going to do this? We're going to go ahead and go over to business.facebook.com, or they change the link all the time. They change the UI all the time. Recently, they just launched this Meta Business Suite thingamajig, where now it's like I can't even find the dang business settings like we used to. So what we do here is we actually go down here and we click on settings right there, right? And then after we click on settings, that took us over to a page that looked something like this. And then from there, we were able to go ahead and click on business settings from there. And then under business settings, we were able to go ahead and go down to ad accounts. And then what we're looking for is we want to get to our ads manager. So sometimes it can be a little bit cumbersome in order to find out how to get into the dang ads manager, right? So this used to be, the page used to look different. Now it looks a little bit different now. But anyways, we're looking to get to somehow, shape or form. You might have to click around depending on if the screens change. It's pretty straightforward. You got to get over to the ads manager. Now, what does the ads manager look like? This is what the ads manager looks like. Surprise, surprise. This is what the screenshots that we've been doing, this is what it looks like. Now, you're going to spend pretty much like 95+% of your time here inside of the ads manager. All of the other setup stuff that we were doing, that was more of like, hey, that's in the settings and all that kind of stuff. But day to day, after you have ads launched and stuff, now I'm not talking about like copy and creative and funnel and tech and all that stuff. That's a whole separate thing. That's like off the platform, right? This is what I'm talking about in terms of actually running the ads, right? Now, what we're going to do here is you probably do not have any campaign set up. You probably don't have any ad set set up, and you probably don't have any ads set up, right? So right here, if I click on these 3 different tabs, it'll show me all of the campaigns, ad sets, and ads that I have running or that are in draft or whatever that might look like. Okay, now if you remember, campaigns are the top level, and then within campaigns you have ad sets, and then within ad sets you have ads. So let's go ahead and actually go over to the campaigns tab and create a blank test campaign for the purposes of just being able to use the search feature inside of Meta's platform. So we're going to go ahead and click on create. Now, once we click on create, now you're probably not going to have all of these because this is just a test account that I am running on. So you might have some other issues, like it says, confirm some details and stuff. Hopefully you don't have that, okay? Because you should have gone through the entire setup. Obviously we couldn't go through the entire setup because we do it on our main account. This is just a test account. Now, campaign objective, we'll talk more about what all these campaign objectives are later on when we actually get through the actual launch process. For right now, it doesn't matter what you select. Now, later on when you actually launch, it does matter what you select, but for the purposes of what we're doing here, which is targeting research, it doesn't matter what we select. Now, normally, even later on, you're gonna see normally we just select leads because we're looking for that conversion campaign. And then if we do this drop down right here, you'll see that this drop down allows us to say, cool, we can name the campaign, we can name the ad set, and we can name the ad. And so for the purposes of this example, I'm just gonna go ahead and put blank test campaign, and you can do the same on your side because this is just gonna be a blank test that we're gonna delete. Then we're gonna have blank test ad set, and then we're gonna have blank test ad, right? So it doesn't really matter what we name it, but we're gonna go ahead and just put that there for now because what we care about is just a search feature that is there underneath the ad set section, okay? So we have that. We then go ahead and click on continue, and then sometimes, just FYI, sometimes it might ask you, it might have this pop-up box over here, and it'll say like, hey, do you want to go through manual setup or do you want to use like our prompt setup or whatever? So they've been testing this new thing. It might not be on all accounts right now, but they've been testing this thing where it's like this streamlined setup thingamajig. We don't want that, okay? If it asks you, hey, how do you want to configure your campaign, your ad sets, and your ads, you want to go ahead and click on manual setup, okay? So it didn't show me right now, but sometimes it does show me that, okay? So that is where, so now you can see on here, we have campaigns, ad sets, and ads. We have all three of those, okay? Boom, just like that. And then if I go ahead and I put my mouse right over here, let me see if I can zoom in for you guys, right? So if I go ahead and put my mouse right over here, it highlights it. It says that it's in draft. I can go ahead and click on edit. And then if I click on edit, now I got to zoom out here because it's going to go ahead and have this kind of panel that shows up here, right? And so this panel that shows up is going to go ahead and have settings. And this is what we were talking about in some of those other trainings where it was very theoretical, right? Is we're gonna have settings for, hey, these are all the campaign settings we can go ahead and do. These are all the ad set settings that we can go ahead and do. And these are all of the ad settings that we can go ahead and do, right? Now, for the purposes of what we are doing, we're gonna go ahead and click here over onto the test ad set, okay? So we're gonna be in the ad set level. Now, obviously you can see on here, we can rename the ad set over here. We can go ahead and set what the conversion location is. We can go ahead and select what page we're gonna be running the ad from. We can go ahead and set whether it's gonna be dynamic creative. We'll talk about that in the future and what that is. We can set the budget. We can go ahead and set the schedule start day. We have some more options on there, whether we want the ad to run all the time or not. And then boom, right here, this is where we're talking about the audience level of things, okay? And so this is really where we're gonna go ahead and play around with the actual interest targeting that we are looking for. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in a little bit more here. Let me go ahead and zoom. There we go. And then what we're gonna do here is we're gonna go down over here to detailed targeting, and we're gonna go ahead and click on edit. And then once we click on edit, now, we don't really care about the rest of these because these are gonna be pretty standard, right? We don't care about trying to add that into our research right now. But what we're doing is we wanna see if the influencers, if the, books, if the, whatever, the news sources that we want to target are within Facebook's system or not, okay? And so what we're gonna do now is we're basically gonna now move on to step number 3, which is inside of the guide, is that we're gonna now go ahead and do some research and start to add into our actual tracker over here all of the different potential audience ideas that we could target, what those audience sizes are, and then what the actual audience type is, right? And so obviously we could put, like, it could be a brand, it could be let me go ahead and make this a white text over here. So it could be, a brand, it could be an influencer, it could be let me see, I had some examples previously, right? Influencer or a brand. Those are kind of the two ones, or an interest. So it could be also an interest potentially as well, right? So let me go ahead and put that as a prompt for us so we can go ahead and see that, okay? So what we're gonna go ahead and do now is, let me go back over here to where we were. Now, what we're gonna do is we're basically going to use the test ad set, which is this field right here, okay? We're gonna use this test ad set, and we're gonna use Google, Amazon, YouTube, and especially our swipe file that we should have been adding to all along. And what we're gonna do is we're now going to go ahead and maybe brainstorm and brain dump, okay, different ideas of maybe popular books, influencers, news sources, popular Facebook pages, websites. We're gonna do some research around, hey, who are some of the experts, the brands, the companies, the topics of interest, the job titles, the fields of study, right? You wanna go back and look at your people research, and you wanna see, okay, the people that I wanna target, what are the influencers and the brands that they are listening to? What do they purchase? What's going on, right? And so let's say, for example, I'm going to stick to my example. Like, let's say, for example, I'm going to be targeting a male offer, and it's going to be for, let's say, athletic males who are interested in making more money. I don't know. I'm just making something up, right? So let's say, for example, I come over here and I'm going to go ahead and search, and I'm going to say, you know what? I think that people who might be interested in this, like let's say LeBron James, can I go ahead and target LeBron James? Let's go ahead and see. Okay, boom, look at that. I can actually target LeBron James. The reason why we wanted to search it though is because let's say, for example, we wanted to target, let me see, can we target Tony Robbins? Let's just check here real quick. Tony Robbins. So you see on here, Tony Robbins, we cannot actually target. And so even though I might want to target Tony Robbins, it's not an exact science. It's not like you can target literally everything and everyone in the entire world. And so what you need to do is you need to verify whether or not you can actually target those individuals, right? So let's say, for example, LeBron James is going to be somebody that I want to go ahead and add on and potentially target as one of my ideas for putting in front of my ads, right? So I'm going to put LeBron James right here. And then the audience size, this is how I get the audience size. I'll go LeBron James right here. And then I go over here to interests. And now I can go ahead and put maybe let's say it's 27 to 32 million. It doesn't really matter how exact you're getting here, but let's say 27 to 32 million. I could either put 27 or I could put 32. I'm going to lean maybe a little bit more on the smaller side. So I'm going to just say 27 million. Now, there's no exact science to that. I could have easily put 32 million as well, but you just want to make sure that you're staying consistent with whatever number you're picking. So I'm just going to go with 27 million. Okay. So audience size, I'm going to go 27 million. And then this is going to be an influencer. Okay. Cool. Next up, let's see if I can actually target, let's see, Nike I should be able to target. I mean, it's pretty big enough. So right here, Nike footwear, Nike football. Yeah, so it's pretty big. I'm going to go ahead and see. Can we target Gymshark? Let's check. Gymshark. Okay, there we go. Look, so Gymshark, we can actually target. That's kind of like a competitor to Nike. But now let me pick up something that is not so big that won't necessarily be in the system. So for example, I recently bought some shoes. They are called the Allbirds shoes. Let's go ahead and see. Is Allbirds in the system? Like, can I target people who are interested in Allbirds? Let's go ahead and see. So you'll see on here, Allbirds is not. And so the reason why what you're doing is that you're doing your research. Okay, so you're going to pull your research. You can have a document where you just put all those research there, right? Or you can think about it off the top of your head. And what you're doing is you're basically looking to see if you can even target them, because there's a chance that you may not be able to actually target that, okay? Now, the other feature that you can go ahead and use, let's say, for example, let's go back to our LeBron James example, right? So I go ahead and put LeBron James. I click on LeBron James, and then once it's in the system that I've clicked on LeBron James over here, I can go ahead and click on this suggestions button. Now, this suggestions button is only going to be able to become clickable if I have at least one interest in place there, right? So I clicked on it, and then I click on suggestions, and now you'll see that it actually shows me suggestions based off, okay, well, you're looking for people who are interested in LeBron James. Well, hey, what about all of this, right? People who are interested in LeBron James have an affinity to, are probably closely related to, right? Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Los Angeles Lakers, right? So these are all different things that I can now target, okay? Now, of course, you don't want to go this broad. I know I'm being extremely kind of broad over here, but just as an example, right, I went ahead and pulled an example that is potential on here. Let me go ahead and zoom in so you can see a little bit better, right? So let's say, for example, I wanted to target men who are into personal development, right? So who are some people who might be interesting to target for men into personal development? So we came up with, let's say, John C. Maxwell, Lewis Howes. These are all people that we already verified, right? So the list of things that have to go into your tracker are the list of things that have been verified as actually targetable on the ad platform, right? So let's say, for example, I know that Tony Robbins is, a motivational speaker or whatever. And so I'm like, you know what? I want to target Tony Robbins. I cannot put Tony Robbins on this list because of the fact that when I went over to the ad platform to verify whether or not on Meta's platform I could actually target him, I could not target people who were interested in Tony Robbins. I just couldn't do it, right? And so that's the reason why Tony Robbins would not make it on this list, okay? And then from there, we went ahead and got like different, apparel companies, we got toiletry companies, we got Gillette, we got like all these different companies, okay? Now, some of them are going to be significantly bigger than others. What we're looking for is for something that is above the size of 250,000, okay? So obviously in the case of the LeBron James example, that was like huge. That's 27 million. That actually might be too big. What we're really aiming for, like you can put 27 million on there, but really what we're aiming for is like, you're looking for like 1 million, 2 million, couple 100,000, right? Like Art of Manliness, right? This 400,000 one for men who are in personal development, this is going to be extremely curated because I know that the Art of Manliness is a personal development website that is for men who are interested in personal development. And it's also not massive. that it's going to be like, 50 million people. It's going to be targeted enough. So this one is like an ideal one right here, right? So I love this one. Dollar Shave Club, it's a little bit too big, 7.3, but I might throw it on there. Maybe it's worth testing in the future, right? Like, hey, 12.5 million, that's massive, right? Gillette doesn't necessarily mean that they're interested in personal development. So I might end up getting my ad in front of people who are not in my target customer, right? We had Lewis Howes on here. That might be a pretty good one, 2.6. 3.2 Fitness Bootcamp. First Form. So First Form is a good one, 666,000 people on there. So it's not like massive where we have multiple millions, right? Peloton, 9 million. It's might be a little bit too big. So we're really looking for that sweet spot. Anything above 250K, yes. Anything like 250K to a million is usually a really good spot. Or if you can get to like 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, like around there, that might also be fine as well. Now, the other thing you're going to see on here is that we have one interest, but we can also mess around with some of the other interests on there, right? So maybe somebody who's interested in basketball, okay? Now, this is going to be an interest. So you see on here, it says an interest versus if I went over to LeBron James, I know it's going to say interest for LeBron James as well, but the reason we put in our category here, the difference between an influencer and an interest is because an interest is more of kind of like a general, like, hey, people who are interested in fitness, boot camp, right? Or people who are interested in XYZ, right? That's when we talk about interests. And then when we talk about, for example, people who are influencers, right? Or brands or something like that. Now, one of the other things you want to kind of be careful of is you don't want to go towards employers, right? So you see over here, it says employers. You don't want to go towards that unless you're doing something that is related to like career or professional development for that specific kind of audience, right? So this is going to be like not people who necessarily work at Zumba Fitness. It could be, but some people who are affiliated with people who work at Zumba Fitness, right? So that's what it is, like Zumba Fitness, not as an interest, but Zumba Fitness now as an employer, right? Job titles, kind of similar thing there as well. Fitness manager, that's going to be a job title kind of thing. So there might be some job titles that you might go after. So let's say, for example, I was going after men who are, who are sports coaches or something, right? So I might type in sports coach. So I got sports page admins. Let me see if I type in coach, see if I can get something else. Let's say I got coach, swimming coach. Oh, look at that, coach, basketball coach, right? This is a job title. Now this is a little bit small. I got 14 to 17,000, but here's also a pro tip. Like I know we said 250,000, but we might actually be able to combine different audience sets, right? So let's say, for example, I got one here that's 14,000. And then let's say, for example, I type in coach again, and I get somebody who's, let's say, a soccer coach, and this is like 12,000, right? And so now the combination of these two are getting me up to about, 30,000. And so now I might actually go even further from there. Now, another quick question that sometimes comes up is like, hey, what about the estimated audience size that is located over here, right? Like, is there a difference between this estimated audience size and this estimated audience size? Yes, there is, okay? Now, some of the reasons, Facebook is changing this all the time, Meta's changing it all the time, but the reason why this size is so much bigger, right, is because we have this thing called advantaged detailed targeting on, okay? Now, sometimes they've been messing around with getting rid of this feature, and so some accounts have it, some accounts do not. But in case, let's say, for example, we have it, if we turn it off, you'll see that all of a sudden, look at that, the estimated audience size just absolutely diminished, right? And the reason for that being is because you can read on here, detailed targeting is basically where Facebook will decide to go ahead and expand your audience according to what they think might work. Now, sometimes this might just be a money grab because Facebook wants you to spend more money on their platform. And so they might show your ad to people who are not as qualified, right? So there are pros and cons. Sometimes the features work good and they actually help you, but sometimes the features don't work good and they're just spending your money for no reason. And then again, you can always go in and click on this little info button, and Meta does a very good job of providing a lot of detail, right? So even around the KPIs, even around how they explain things, obviously they're a company that is out there to help make sure, like, not everybody who runs Meta ads has, a coach who's helping them. And so Meta tries to do their best job of educating their users as well. So you can learn just based off of their platform and what's going on there as well. So anyways, back to this example over here, what we could do is we could go ahead and combine multiple different sections together in order to pool one really big audience together, right? So if that was the case, let's say, for example, I wanted that to be the case, I could come over here and say, you know what, I'm going to do coach basketball, okay? And then I might do plus, and I might do soccer coach, okay? Plus, and then I can go ahead and just really plus all of them together. And let's say I have 10,500 and 14,000, 15,000, 10,000 plus 15,000, right? So I might come over here and I might say, this equals 10,000 plus 15,000, okay? And then that's, I know that's 25K or whatever, right? So I don't know, 10,000 plus 15,000, something like that, right? So I know that's 25K, and then I know that this might be, let's say, for example, I think this was a job title or something like that, right? And so that could be another alternative. Now, we personally, I mean, at the end of the day, you can test whatever you want, right? Personally, we have just usually found a lot of good results with just targeting, kind of interest-based targeting, brands targeting, this kind of stuff. But honestly, it's not because we haven't tested this other stuff. Like, truthfully, it's because we haven't tested it that we don't know if job titles and some of this other stuff would work as well. And then, of course, on top of that, there's all these other interest-based targeting. If you click on browse and then you go down, demographics, you want to look down, interest, you want to look down. And so ultimately what we're doing here is we just want to make sure that we have 30 good audiences in order to test, okay? And what we're doing here is we want to make sure that for each of those audiences, we actually do have all of this information right over here, right? So I'm just gonna go ahead and copy a couple just to show you. Remember, this is just an example, right? If you show up on a coaching call and you have like multiple duplications in yours, that is a big no-no. But however, you understand the point that I'm talking about here, right? I'm just gonna go ahead and copy just randomly over here just to show you as an example, just like that, just like that. Okay, very nice. Okay, so now that we have that, say for example, 30. Now, 30 is the bare minimum that you wanna have. If you can get more, even better, right? Like if you want to go more than that, that's fine. Now we are actually going to pick the top 5. And so obviously if you want to go out there and get like 100 of them, you probably need to spend a lot of money on ads in order to test 100 audiences. So probably 30 is a good benchmark, and then you have enough, fuel there. You can test 5 and then go through enough audiences and then really start to add them to your testing pool here. But we're really looking for about 30, okay? And so again, what you're doing is you're going through different influencers, different news sources, different Facebook pages, different websites, using the suggestions tab. You're looking through job titles, you're looking through interests, you're looking through all of these things and then verifying them with this test ad set in order to be able to go ahead and add that into your actual potential ideas tab over there, okay? Now, a couple other points I want to go ahead and mention. Don't mess around with any of the other settings. That's very important. And then be careful not to hit publish, right? So these are all drafts. You do not want to go ahead and publish this. That is not going to be good for you at all, okay? Because obviously sending this through is for sure going to have our ad account just jacked up because we went ahead and sent something that's like a test through the roof, right? So again, if you like lose that place or you want to get back to that place, you can just click on ad sets and then you go ahead and click on edit and you can scroll down and then from there you're going to find that section again in order to be able to go ahead and validate that detailed targeting and then be able to go ahead and add into your tracker some of the different audiences that you could target. And so again, if you want to be successful with this, make sure you have at least 30 really good audiences that if you were to bet your life on it, right, your life savings, you're like, you know what, these 30 audiences are really good. Do not be lazy about it, be organized about it, and do the work, because I promise you, once it comes time to pick your top 5 in the next upcoming trainings and then we actually launch, that's how you have the highest probability of your ads being successful, because you actually took the time and not just put some random some massive brands. Okay, anybody who's interested in Amazon.com and Walmart, like I'm gonna put my ad in front of them. Come on, like that's just lazy, right? So you want to actually put the time into it so you can be more successful with this, okay? So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the step-by-step for getting your target research for inbuilt audiences and all of the interests for that. And then we're gonna go ahead and now cut back over to the main training. All right, welcome back from that mini training that walked you through the inbuilt audience target research, okay? So getting all of that targeting put together as your potential ideas is not only gonna serve you for your first initial launch, but it's gonna give you enough fuel so that way you have enough audiences that you can continuously test as you come up with new copy and new creative and you wanna go ahead and test different audiences. All of that is going to be a part of the hypothesis that you are making in order to have a consistent lead generation flow from your ads, okay? So having said that, what's next? So now that we've actually gone ahead and gotten our target research and we have that massive list of potential audiences to target, in the upcoming training section, we can now move on to selecting out of that potential list a few, the top 5 that we're actually going to test on our first launch, okay? So that's exactly what we're gonna go ahead and get into in the next training section. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this has been this specific training on targeting research and inbuilt audiences. If you have any questions or you run into any issues, make sure you go ahead and ask inside of the community so that way the other community members can go ahead and help you. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we will catch you in the next training section. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this training section about the initial test targeting selection. So inside of this training section, we're going to be selecting a few of the audiences to test out of the massive list of potential audiences that we gathered from our research. Now, remember, this is going to be a testing process that is going to come at play depending on the budget that you're going to be willing to spend on a daily basis, XYZ, right? So you can test faster. All of this stuff, we'll talk about it later when we talk about the mindset of testing and how it works and data collection, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately what's happening here is that there is a hypothesis that we are making from our ad copy, our ad creative, and our audience. We're going to then go ahead and put it out into the real world. And then from there, we're going to collect the feedback, look at the data, see if it's within KPI, come up with our second hypothesis, and continue to do this, okay? And then obviously, as this entire process is happening, we are getting more and more leads, we're getting more and more calls booked, we're getting more and more community members, depending on the strategy. All of this is happening in the background, right? So we're kind of doing all of these things in parallel, okay? Now, the big thing to understand, kind of the premise and the strategy behind this, is that when we actually get to the launch section of all of these trainings, you're going to learn how to be able to scientifically test each of these audiences and see if it is a proven winner for your specific offer, copy, or creative. Okay, so this is what the entire process is going to look like. Is what we do is we put a hypothesis, copy, and creative out there to 3 audiences. Okay, so we have our copy and we have our creative, and what we do is we want to hold the variables constant. Okay, so I'm going to use a little bit more scientific language, and you're going to be able to get used to some of these terms. Is that we want to hold some of these variables, right? We have 3 variables. We have our copy, we have our creative, and then we have our audience targeting. We want to hold, out of those 3 variables, we want to hold 2 of them constant, so that way we can actually see which variable impacted the actual outcome. And so in this case, if we send the same copy and the same creative to 3 different audiences, well, guess what? If, let's say, this one doesn't work and this one doesn't work, right? And this one does work, then guess what that tells us? It means that the issue wasn't the copy and creative, it was that the audience had to resonate with the copy and creative. And because of the fact that we got one of them to work, it means that yes, the copy and creative, of course, it could always use work, but the truth is that yes, it's good enough in order to generate the leads and the calls and the customers in the audience that we want, right? However, if let's say, for example, these 3 audiences, all of them came out as an X, then at that point we would have to question and say, you know what, maybe it's not the audiences, maybe it's the copy and the creative and it's not really good. Or it could be that, yeah, it could be the audience that you just, dramatically got all 3 audiences so wrong that you were completely in the wrong direction. But more than likely, it's because the copy and the creative is just terrible and it's not working, it's not according to KPI, and we'll have metrics for all of that we're going to be showing you how to be able to do, right? But let's say hypothetically, we put it in front of, NBA, Nike, and LeBron James. Again, for God's sakes, is not a, mystical, magical example. It's just an example, okay? Just understand this is an example. There's nothing specific about Nike, NBA, or LeBron James. I'm not even sure if you can target those on the ad platforms, okay? But let's say, for example, out of those 3, one ends up being the winner, okay? And when we say a winner, it means that the data that we got back from running that small test, in a very, very small amount of tests, right? We're talking about like $5 or $10, okay? We're talking about a very small amount, is that the metrics were within KPI, okay? The key performance indicators, they were within KPI, and we're gonna show you what those KPIs are, XYZ. And so if that is the case, that means that we know that Nike, the audience Nike, is a proven winner for us. It is something that we can put into production because we held all of the other variables constant, and then this one actually proved to be a winner. Now, when we actually have a winner, what we do is we then hold that winning audience as the control. Okay, so we have variables and then we have the control. And when we say a control, it means that we hold it constant and we say, okay, this one is going to be the one that's in production. We're going to leave this one on. And again, if this is going over your head, don't worry. We're going to have completely separate trainings that are going to go much more in depth into this. But I want you to understand the overarching views, right? We're going to go ahead and leave this ad set, these ads on, and these are going to be the ones that are generating for us calls, or generating for us customers, doing all this kind of stuff. And now what we're going to do is we're now going to go back and now we're going to test that same copy and creative, because we know that that copy and creative works now because we have something that was a winner. And so what we're going to do is we're now going to go out there and take that same copy and creative. We're not going to change the variables, right? Because we know that this works over here. Why are we going to go out there and now change it and now go through a scratch test? No. We're going to keep it the same, but we're now going to go ahead and put it in front of, let's say, Adidas, Lululemon, and Gymshark. Now, why did we go in this direction? Because, hey, we said, you know what? NBA was like a sports organization, and then LeBron James was like an influencer, but Nike is like a brand. So let's go ahead and try maybe some other sports brands, and maybe that's what's really resonating with the market right now, right? With this specific copy and creative, with this specific offer, with this customer avatar, XYZ, hypothetically, just as an example, right? And so now we're going to run another 3 tests, but on a similar vector. And then what we can also do is we can also run another test to Nike, but instead, now what we're going to do is we're going to try to beat this control, okay? We're going to say, you know what? We're going to maybe keep the same copy, keep the same audience, but now we're going to change the creative. And so now you can see we're keeping the audience constant, we're keeping the copy constant, and we're only going to change the creative. And so again, we're only changing one of the 3 variables to then see, hey, can we outperform? Can we look at the metrics and can we get a better cost per lead? Can we get a better landing page conversion? Can we get a better, Facebook group join? Can we get a better cost per booked call? Can we get a better cost per acquisition? All of these things that I just said, right? All of these are KPIs that you're going to learn more about, but we're now going to see, hey, can we beat the metrics and the data that we have for this control? And maybe this entire test is going to flop, and maybe this one is a really good one, and then maybe this one actually outperforms this one. And so this is the science of how we are actually running advertising and as we are scaling advertising. And so when we talk about the 3 stages of this entire process, right, learning how to be able to manage all of this, and all of it is really automated, right? So it really just takes like 10 or 15 minutes every morning for you to look at your metrics and make sure everything's going good. And then you go out there and run the rest of your business. You go out there and, coach clients, all this kind of stuff. Initially, it's going to seem a little bit overwhelming because of the fact that it's new for you. But as you develop the skill, it's going to become so much easier for you to be able to do 5 or 10 minutes a day, right? And so when we talk about optimizing and scaling, that is how you be able to go ahead and have an ad account in which you are able to spend, $500, $1,000, $5,000 a day. And then as you're spending, let's say $1,000 a day, you're making back, let's say $10,000 or $20,000, $30,000 a day, right? You're getting a 5 to 10x return on investment. And you're going to hear us talk a little more about this in the future. But the stock market, right? When people invest in the stock market, the average return that is considered good is like 8 to 12%, okay? Versus with paid advertising, the average return that we're minimum expecting is 300%, if not 800% month after month. And so if you think about that, the skill set that you are learning, right, this optimize and scale and all of this, these are the skill sets that allow you to be able to go ahead and have a money machine that gives you a higher return on investment than any other investment that is possible, any other investment class. There's a reason why so many people want to invest into businesses, right? Really, when you are investing in the stock market, what are you doing? You're investing into businesses that are doing marketing and advertising. And you're getting such a small percentage of that ownership, right? But the people who are actually running the companies, the people who are actually managing the company, the people who actually have the skill sets to run the companies, they're making hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And so this is what we are talking about when we talk about the game of paid advertising as an automated system for lead generation in your money machine, right? So when we talk about this entire process of advertising and being able to put copy and creative in front of an audience and then targeting and all that kind of stuff, remember, I don't want you to forget the bigger picture here, right? We've talked about the bigger picture many times, but I want to remind you, this is in that lead generation system. So we have that faucet that we can open up or loosen up, right? Like tighten it up if we want to, depending on how many customers we want to flow through here, right? And then we have our lead nurture systems, we have our sales systems, we have our fulfillment systems, right? And so as you open this faucet up, as you learn this skill set, right? Like obviously if I go to this faucet right now and I just turn it up to, let's say I want to spend $5,000 a day in ads, even though I know if I spend $5,000 a day in ads, I have the process of, let's say, for example, I'm going to make, minimum 15K back, if not making, 25 plus K back, right? But if you spend $5,000 in ads and you have this entire system proven out, well, guess what? You're going to need enough, appointment slots on the calendar in order to be able to take that many calls if you're doing a call funnel, right? You're going to need somebody to be able to coach all of those clients. You're going to need some sort of lead nurture mechanism in place. And so there are systems that have to come. You can't just go off the bat and say, you know what? I'm a one-on-one coach and I'm going to go ahead and spend $5,000 in ads. It doesn't work that way. You open up the faucet a little bit, okay? And then you slowly, as you get your systems in place, you get your scale systems in place, you hire people, you do all of this. That is how you scale the organization. And that is how the operations of the organization scale. And that is how you get to the point where you're able to do hundreds, millions, if not billions of dollars per month, right? If you think about Walmart does $500 billion a year in revenue, right? We're talking about over, I think that's $1.3 billion a day in revenue, right? If you actually do the math of that, it's insane. And so this is what we're talking about, the money machine, so that way you understand the levels of this. And so what's happening is that each of these systems within this machine is doing its part within your overall money machine in order to move the prospect to the next part, which is increasing your revenue as you continue to provide value to customers, okay? So overall, even though this specific module that we're focusing on right now, right, is about advertising, is about lead generation, right? All of that is heavily focused on. We're like super zoomed in to lead generation right now, right? We're talking about the science and the skill set of lead generation right now. I do not want you to forget that all of these systems work together because it is a flow. And so the more and more you learn the skills and the identity in order to get better at all of these systems, right? All of the tools that are within these systems, the more income, impact, and freedom that you are going to be able to have. And so that is what's going to dictate the results that you have, because your skills when it comes to lead generation, lead nurture, sales, fulfillment, resale and ascension is so good. Your identity, your ability to be able to have work ethic, patience, grit, resilience, right? Your belief that, hey, if I spend more money on ads, I actually did that once at a small level and it worked. So therefore, if I spend more money on ads now, it's going to work again. That is a belief, right? And so the more you work on the skill and the identity pieces of this, and within this game, that is how you be able to continue to level up. I hope that makes sense. I really wanted to kind of take the time right now to go off a little bit, right? I know we went into a little bit of a rabbit hole here and got a little bit off of topic, but I really wanted you to be able to understand the overarching strategy. So that way, now as we get into the step-by-step of actually picking that initial test targeting and the selection behind it, you understand like, okay, I understand the bigger picture and what's happening here. As I get ready to launch, I'm going to be able to have these 5 audiences in which I'm going to be able to target, and this is what it looks like. And I'm going to have, these controls and these variables. I'm going to test all of that and how it's related to lead generation. Okay, so with that being said, let's go ahead and cut over to that mini training in which we are going to go ahead and talk about the step-by-step split screen for all of that. So let's go ahead and do that right now. All right, welcome to this mini training that's going to talk to you about the initial test targeting selection. So the very first thing we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and open up our targeting tracker. Okay, so we should have already done all of the work that was required for that. So we're going to go ahead and open that up. We're also going to go ahead and open up our copy and creative for the purpose of this mini training. I'm not going to open that up because it's just an example, but you want to open up your copy and creative to be able to go ahead and get some inspiration before you pick your initial hypothesis test audiences. Okay, so then what we're going to go ahead and do is once we have that, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit here so we can actually see all of this. What we're going to go ahead and do, I know it's a little bit small, but you're going to get the gist of what I'm talking about here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and pick out of the 30 audiences that we have, we're going to go ahead and pick the top 5 in which if we were to go ahead and bet our life savings on, these top 5 would have the highest chance of working with our offer, with our copy, with our creative, with our customer avatar, with our 4Ps, all of that stuff, okay? And what we're gonna do is we can just go ahead and click on the number over here, right? So let's say, for example, I wanted to do MyFitnessPal, and then I can drag, let's say the number 17, I can go ahead and drag it under the testing column inside of the template there, okay? And so that way, I know that I got that one there. And then let's say the next one I want to test is, let's say I wanted to test, I know first form was here, so I want to test first form. And then I also want to test, let's see over here, first form, the art of manliness. Let's say I wanted to test that one. And then let's say, for example, I wanted to test Lewis Howes, let's say, for example. So I got 4. And then, and the biggest thing that I'm looking on here, so you'll see I got 2.6 million, 400,000, 966,000, 9 million, right? So this is a very big one. And then I got 2 ones that are pretty curated. I like that one. Lewis Howes is kind of in the middle, right? 2 million on there. And then for my 5th one, let me see what I have on here, right? So these are all really big ones. Now, of course, this is just an example. Ideally, you want to have a good range when you are picking in your target research. You want to have a good range, right? Good mix of, very large ones, kind of small ones, niched ones. Like you want to have a good range so you have a good amount to be able to test from. And so out of this, I even duplicated the same ones like double because it was just an example, right? So out of this list, I'm not a fan of too many of these. Maybe, I don't know, maybe like Les Brown, maybe, right? But I'm not, either way, if this was the actual research that I had, I'd be like, I got to go back and do some better research because like I wasn't a fan of like some of these were just too big. I wasn't a fan of, if this was the data set that I was working from, I would say, you know what, I got to go out there and do some better research because I wasn't a fan of this. But you get the point, right? And so the point here is that we're going to just go ahead and move from the potential ideas over to testing. And then as we're testing, we're going to be able to use this tracker to then be able to say, cool, you know what? Let's now go ahead and move this from testing. Once it actually gets proven, everything's within KPI, as you're going to learn in upcoming trainings, you can then move it down to proven, right? Or maybe failed because it wasn't within KPI XYZ. And you're going to learn how to be able to do all of that upcoming, okay? And so again, you want to really pick the top 5 that have the highest chance of being winners and proven. And again, you want to aim for a good mix of audiences for that initial test that is going to give you some really good data, okay? And so you want to be able to think when you look at the test pool that you're looking at right here, right? So you want to say, you know what? Okay, so I got I got 2 influencers in there, and they're kind of influencers that are quite different, right? So that's good. So that way, if my ad set resonates with, Lewis Howes, that'll give me some good insight, versus if my ad set resonates with, Les Brown, that'll give me some good insight. And then I got a supplement company in there. So that'll give me a good idea of a direction that I could go from there. And then I got a really big, app that's kind of generic over here. That'll give me a good direction. Like, hey, if my ad works there, that's a good kind of data point that I'm collecting, right? So you really want to think like 2 steps ahead, because these are not just random audiences, right? What's happening here is that as you're doing your tests, you're very intentional and deliberate about exactly what you are doing the test for, and what you spending that money on those ads, even if it ends up being a flop, is going to allow you to learn from. So that way, like, okay, cool, you know what? This is a good direction for me to go in. Like if it resonates with this Art of Manliness website, well, what other websites are there that might be similar to Art of Manliness that I could target on my next go around, right? And so that way, every single test that you're doing is informing you, and the data that you're collecting, the learnings that you're getting from that are allowing you to get better and better and better and more optimized in knowing your customer avatar, in knowing your market, and knowing which direction you should head into, okay? And so that's really kind of the mindset behind selecting the 5 audiences to test. And so that's really what it's all about here in the initial test targeting selection. Pretty straightforward in terms of what we're doing, and just kind of, clicking on the number and then dragging down. But a lot of this is based off of the actual pre-work that you've done with the actual market research and the targeting that we did earlier, right? So again, you saw, hey, if I had a list like this, I might not be happy with my market research, and I might go back and look and verify some other audiences because I want something that's really good. So when I pick my top 5, it's informing me and educating me on the lessons, and I'm like, you know what? This is valuable for me to go ahead and test. And so with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the mini training on the initial test targeting selection. Let's go ahead and jump back over to the main training. All right, welcome back from that step-by-step. So you can see it was pretty straightforward. There's anything complicated. We've already done a lot of the work, and you're going to see a lot of these assets that you've put together building are literally going to come like copy and paste, super easy to put together once we actually get to the launch. And it's going to be actually very straightforward once we actually do get to the launch of all of this, okay? So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this has been this specific training on the initial test targeting selection. If you do have any questions, maybe about the overarching strategy, everything that we've talked about, the behind the scenes, how it works, anything like that, make sure you go ahead and ask inside of the student community, so that way one of the community members can go ahead and help you. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and continue on this journey. We will catch you in the next training section.